Number 28 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans, pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted on April 21st, 2021, the committee is meeting on its study of frozen at sea spot prawns. Today's meeting, of course, is taking place in a hybrid format, pursuant to the House Order of January 25th, 2021, and therefore members can attend in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website, so you are aware the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. For those participating virtually, I would like to outline a few rules to follow. Members and witnesses may speak in the official language of their choice. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either Floor, English, or French. With the latest Zoom version, you may now speak in the language of your choice without the need to select the corresponding language channel. You will also notice that the platform's raised hand feature is now in a more easily accessed location on the main toolbar, should you wish to speak or alert the chair. I would now like, of course, to welcome our witnesses for today. We have from the BC COVID Active Fishermen's Committee, Jim McIsaac, Managing Director. From the Pacific Prawn Fishermen's Association, we have Michael Atkins, Executive Director. From the Prawn Industry Caucus, we have Emily Orr, Lead Representative. And from the United Fishermen and Allied Workers Union, Unifor, we have James Lawton, President. We will now proceed with opening remarks from Mr. McIsaac. You can begin for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you very much for the invitation to speak to you today. I come to you from my home in Sydney on the traditional territory of Coast Salish people on Vancouver Island. I wear several fisheries hats, including Secretary of the BC COVID Active Fishermen's Committee. My heritage is Scottish. On one side, from a fishing community in the Orkney Islands, on the other, a farming community in Southern Ireland. The fishhook dates back at least 22,000 years. It predates the plow by millennia. Fishing runs deep in our collective DNA. I grew up fishing on the BC coast in recreational, commercial, and food fisheries. I have fished from Portland Canal on the Alaska border to Juan de Fuca Strait, out to Reynolds Sound on the west coast of Paraguay, and into Tribune Channel in Knights Inlet. And I have commercially fished prawn. Fishing paved my way through university, where I studied mathematics, physics, and philosophy. Since leaving university, I've co-authored a number of fisheries research papers. The latest one on access rights went to print last week. I've also been involved in multiple advisory processes: shrimp, crab, groundfish, herring, and salmon. The COVID Active Fishermen's Committee is made up of 26 members and reports out to 150. It has held over 50 meetings since the pandemic broke. It works in 4 areas, trying to ensure fisheries and harvesters survive COVID. They are relief programs, market support, flexibility in fisheries management, and health and safety community protocols. In late January, we were made aware that tubbing, the freezing of prawn tails at sea in tubs of water, had become an issue for DFO. Certainly, we thought this was a mistake. This issue had not been raised by DFO in the last Prawn Advisory Board meeting last November. In fact, it hadn't been raised as a major issue going back in all the records we checked. The practice of tubbing has been used to sell prawns locally for the last 50 years. We invited DFO to the COVID meeting February 10th to discuss the issue. Prawn fishermen told DFO of the importance of this market, about the need for clarity now as fishermen were ordering tubs and taking orders for what may be characterized as an illegal product. DFO responded that they heard us loud and clear, that they were working on a solution, but they couldn't commit to a definitive answer or a timeline. DFO attended our committee meeting 2 weeks later, February 24th. No change, no clarity, no means for compliance offered, and even worse, it wasn't clear if there was any regulatory room to collaborate to find a solution that allowed tubbing this year. They could not provide any definitive answer on where this was going. A small group met with DFO on March 10th. We discussed the legal opinion. DFO had their own legal opinion that did not agree, and it could not be shared. We met again March 26th, where we discussed written industry protocols, which DFO characterized as helpful interim guidance. DFO was clear, at least to the extent that they could be, that there were two issues that were not compatible with tubbing: minimum prawn size as set out in the IFMP and readily determinable as set out in the general fisheries regulation. We pretty much begged them to lay out a means for compliance. They would not do this. In short, they do not believe tubbing can meet the regulations as they are now written. They have been equally clear that CMP action this year would be inform and educate, and enforcement would be at the discretion of the officer. And next year, there would be no discretion, it would be enforcement. One estimate has 600,000 pounds of tails sold in tubs in 2020. At $15 a pound, this is $8 million to harvesters. The average price when sold to processors was $4 a pound. That's more than a 50% loss in income. And because of COVID, the public is really interested in local food. Connoisseurs have flocked to spot prawns. We expected the tub market to grow again this year. What is clear is that DFO thinks it necessary to eliminate tubbing in the future. There is no doubt this will directly impact harvester viability. DFO also wants to eliminate IUU fishing. So do fishermen. Does DFO consider stopping direct sales the easiest way to stop IUU fishing? Don't know. Instead of stopping tubbing, DFO should be supporting legal catch getting into local markets. Putting a legitimate fishery on the line to stop an illegal fishery is a bizarre management strategy. It's amazing any harvester can survive under this existential threat from the regulator. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. McIsaac. That was almost dead on to the 5 minutes. So now we'll go next to the Pacific Prawn Fishermen's Association. Mr. Atkins, when you're ready for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, Fisheries Standing Committee members. My name is Mike Atkins. I'm the Executive Director of the Pacific Prawn Fishermen's Association. The PPFA is a nonprofit organization with an elected board that represents the 245 commercial prawn license holders, of which 25% are held by First Nations. I am here today to inform you of a drastic reinterpretation of the fishery general regulations by some DFO Pacific Region staff, and we are urging you to recommend to the Department of Fisheries and Oceans that their reinterpretation is flawed. The issue is these tubs right here. 1 pound tails in a plastic tub. DFO Pacific Region has recently deemed that the freezing of prawns in a 1 pound tub is no longer compliant with Section 32.6, which states no person shall catch and retain fish under the authority of a license issued for the purpose of commercial fishing shall have fish in possession if the fish is skinned, cut, packed, or otherwise dealt with in such a manner that where size limits are applicable, the size of the fish cannot be readily determined. The PPFA, based on legal advice, which I have attached, is of the view that the size of prawns packaged in tubs can be readily determined. Upon immediate inspection of the tub, many of the prawns can be measured in their frozen state, and the remainder can be easily thawed in less than 2 minutes and 30 seconds, thus meeting the requirement of readily determined. I tried to share a video, but was told that wasn't possible, but the video is titled Thawing Frozen Prawn Tails with a Deck Hose, and it can be found on YouTube, and it shows us doing just that, thawing a full tub of prawns in less than 2 minutes, 30 seconds. The practice of freezing prawn tails in tubs of seawater has been employed for 50 years, and it was endorsed by DFO at the time of their introduction. The prawn fishery lands approximately $45 million worth of product each year and provides hundreds of well-paying jobs. The inability to freeze prawns in tubs would have serious economic consequences to the fishery. The harvest of undersized prawns is not a conservation issue, and this is supported by a peer-reviewed science paper by DFO staff. The minimum size is in place for economic reasons. which is why there is no size limit in the recreational prawn fishery, only the commercial fishery. And again, I've attached supporting documents for your reference. The PPFA is working cooperatively with DFO Pacific to resolve this issue. The PPFA has developed a set of industry protocols, once again attached, that will allow the practice of tubbing to continue for this year. However, we have been told it is not a long-term solution. The practice of tubbing is key to market demand and the financial sustainability of the fishery, and there is no appetite from industry to discontinue the practice. Thank you for your time, and we hope that you share our interpretation and the previous DFO interpretation that freezing prawns in tubs does meet the definition of readily determinable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Atkins. We'll now go to the Prawn Industry Caucus. Emily Orr for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Emily. I am the lead representative of the Prawn Industry Caucus. I'm also the business agent for the United Fishermen and Allied Workers Union, director for the Commercial Fishing Caucus, and a member of the COVID-19 Active Fishermen's Committee. I commercial prawn fished for 12 years. I began with my father when I was 19 and worked my way up to running the boat myself. So I do have some experience prawn fishing and prawn tubbing. I fished in other fisheries as well, but prawn remains dear to my heart. I'm very privileged to be here to represent active commercial prawn harvesters, and that is the work of the PIC, is advocacy and representation for harvesters. As we've heard already today and over the past few months, this reinterpretation by DFO of prawn tubbing and that it no longer meets their definition of what readily determined looks like is incredibly troubling to this industry and to the Canadian public. The interference with the general community to access a common property resource by buying seafood harvest direct from the vessels is an attack on the basic foundation of community, which is access to food from the food producers. We're very much hoping to have some logic and reason brought to this issue, and we're very grateful to this committee for taking time to focus on this issue. Given that there's been a lot of detail provided already about how we've arrived at this issue and what the timeline has been since learning of DFO's reinterpretation, I'll focus my comments more on what this reinterpretation would do to impact commercial harvesters. The fishery is typically quite short and lasts only 40 days. Harvesters that can freeze prawn tails for sale to domestic market have the ability to prolong their income and achieve a greater price per pound than what is paid by the wholesale market. That increased profit is due to the additional time and effort that is required to package those prawns in smaller portions as compared to a wholesale offload that is happening daily in the live market or for bulk loads of frozen product that is going overseas. That connection to community that is also achieved by local people being able to purchase prawns direct from their harvesters is really important to the fishing community, and it's important to the people that live close to the docks that they're able to access that food. When we talk about the longevity of the income in terms of spreading the opportunity across the year outside of that 40-day season, it's really important to consider that many harvesters, especially in the last couple of years, have been faced with very low prices for the wholesale prawns. So when they're able to sell individual tubs to the community members, they are achieving a much greater profit for their product. That, this last year, has indefinitely saved many harvesters from going from either breaking even to actually being able to make a profit. Some harvesters have come to me and told me that if they were not able to sell their frozen prawn tubs over the winter to their community members, that they would have gone backwards. There's a terrific cost to going fishing, and so to make a profit, several thousand pounds need to be caught right off the bat in order that the expenses are looked after before anybody's making any money. So being able to sell prawns frozen in tubs is something that is incredibly critical to the viability of fish harvesters. In this situation, we're very much hoping for a review of this reinterpretation, and one that can provide an avenue for us to support CNP in their responsibility to uphold the regulations, and one that also accepts the freezing of prawn tails in tubs. We've proposed a condition of license be added that defines what readily determined means, and then provides wording that would request and require prawn harvesters to thaw tubs of prawns in a set amount of time, less than 5 minutes, for example, upon inspection request by CNP. We feel this is a very reasonable way forward for this resolution to be made for everybody and all parties to move on. And we're very much hoping that the work of this committee will facilitate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Orr. 5 or 10 seconds left in the time. That's always good. We'll now go to the United Fishermen Allied Workers Union, Unifor. Mr. Lawson, welcome back to FOPO. You're up for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak today. My name is James Lawson, and I am the president of the United Fishermen Allied Workers Union / Unifor, a representative of the Prawn Industry Caucus and a prawn fisherman. DFO's mandate includes maintaining the sustainability of fisheries and working with fishers to enable continued prosperity from fish and seafood. Prawn tipping is not a sustainability issue and is in direct opposition to enabling our prosperity and the prosperity of others who purchase our prawns. As a prawn fisherman, I adhere to regulations including a trap limit, minimum mesh size, daily single hauls, time and area closures, and the spawner index to maintain the sustainability of the stock. Bearing eggs is of appropriate size, and we also sort out the other species if present. Measuring devices are always close at hand. We put in great time and effort to make sure we provide a quality product and maintain the sustainability of our stocks. We don't want to keep undersized product, and we certainly don't want to have it aboard for a week or more, risking penalties. If conservation and protection wanted to exercise their right to board my vessel and check for undersized prawns, they have ample opportunity. It could be done using a sample off the grading table, by taking a sample out of the live tank, by taking an unfrozen tub off the freezer plates, or by thawing a frozen sample in little to no time using a deck hose, kettle, or hot water from a tap. It's insulting that conservation and protection could look past all this to reinterpret the general fisheries rule for just one fishery and then say these penalties are at the discretion of officers for the season. It would be a great risk to process in this manner without DFO officially stating it'll be legal to tub prawns this year. I encourage industry-made solutions, but this issue has many small and simple solutions, and it feels like we're being coerced into making a binding decision ourselves. I do not think enforcing a tub ban would stand in a court of law, and I think that it would be a big waste of everybody's time and money. The solution could be as simple as a reasonably sized transparent container. And is there nothing to be said for precedents? This has been done for decades without problems, and there is no recent spike in undersized prawn infractions that would be cause for reinterpretation. It's going to do nothing but hurt the markets of prawn fishermen. Frozen tubs sold in my hometown were my most valuable product last year, beating my most valuable export prawns by $4 a pound. Many fishermen, including myself, are planning to tub a lot more this year to provide more prawns to our home communities. People are willing to pay a good price for superior product when they know who caught it, where it came from, and it's not an inferior product imported and found on a grocery store shelf. Prawns have always been valuable in local markets, and they were further explored as a viable option last year in response to the COVID pandemic, creating export market uncertainty. I don't know the official figures, but local tub sales are said to grow tenfold compared to previous years. This is a great success story, local seafood being available to local markets. It is economic prosperity, it is food security. It humanizes us and makes us proud to be able to provide for people we know, giving a visible attachment to our labor. If prawn tubbing is taking away, that means British Columbians may only be able to access prawns in season if they live close to a boat who is delivering live to the dock, or from a restaurant who is buying live prawns, or obtaining some sort of poorer quality frozen product. People like to eat prawns year-round, and the best way to preserve them is frozen in tubs of seawater. That is the superior product that restaurant owners will purchase for their meals outside of May and June. Taking tubs away leaves us with only the export market for vessels who freeze at sea. And there are many examples of how that can hurt the bottom line of fishing businesses when the primary market is not favorable like it is now due to the pandemic. It is strange that DFO is presently considering a date change based on availability of local markets while simultaneously taking away another. This proposed ban is not about sustainability. It is not working with fishermen to enable the continued prosperity of us or those who rely on or enjoy the product. It is a detriment to food security. It singles out one fishery in a long-standing regulation. Let us be a success story with a strong local market. What is happening is not right. It serves only to devalue catching prawns and make them unavailable to ourselves. I'd like to end this before it even begins. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson. Right on time. I will say, Mr. Lawson, that the interpreters were having some trouble to actually hear you properly. And fortunately, I think they did have the your written statement, so they were able to do the translation. They're asking that maybe for the question round, if you would have put your iPad or computer or laptop or whatever and block out the video, stop the video and just be there for the sound, they'll try and probably pick it up better that way and be able to translate appropriately. So that concludes our testimony part. We'll now go to our questioning by our members of the committee, starting off for 6 minutes or less. Mr. Bragdon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to each of the witnesses for your testimony and insight and expertise. And look, I can't help it, but Mr. Lawson, seeing you actually on the boat while you're doing testimony before committee, there's just something that seems so right about that. So anyways, good job, and thanks for taking time from doing what you do best to talk to us here at committee. We appreciate it. I want to start with a question. It can go to each of the members of the committee. I'd be interested in your perspective. It says the change in the interpretation seems to be being felt, as we've heard testify, right across the industry and across the sector. Have any of you been consulted by the minister or DFO before this change came about? And part two of that, were you given any advance notice that they may be looking at reinterpreting the regulations? So I'll go across the panel here with that. We can start with you, Mr. McIsaac, and then work away.
So I would say no, no prior knowledge of this and no consultation prior to it, the change being made. Yeah.
Okay, Ms. Orr.
Thank you. It was quite a shock to hear about it. I heard about it more as a rumor. It was unconfirmed what DFO's position or intention was until we were able to work towards some meetings. Once I heard that it was in fact true that DFO was looking to interpret the regulations, I pulled up the Prawn Advisory Board reports from the past 3 years, and at no time has CNP delivered any specific report or flagged this matter for the Prawn Advisory Board to review, nor have they flagged the issue of retention of undersized prawns as something of issue. So this comes as you might imagine, quite a shock.
Thank you, Ms. Orr. Mr. Atkins.
Yeah, I can provide a bit of clarity on what exactly happened. The PPFA, along with CNP and Fish Management, had developed a committee to discuss traceability and ways to limit illegal product entering the marketplace. And it was during our fourth meeting, a few months in, where the fishery officer asked about the tubs. And it was at that time, the following day, we were notified that this regulation was being reinterpreted. And that was the issue. So it came up organically. There was no warning whatsoever. And really frustrating when we were at the table to do great traceability work for the industry.
Thank you, Mr. Askin. Mr. Lawson.
No prior warnings for me. It came as quite a shock.
Okay. And I see, Mr. McIsaac, you've got your hand back up. Be glad to hear again. Yep.
Yeah, just one comment. I've been made aware that there has been some enforcement action on exactly this with the recreational sector recently in the last 6 months. And I'm not sure if that is behind, it was a recreational fisherman that had frozen his prawns in tubs. I don't think there was any intention to sell that in market, but that's how he had saved his prawns and was told that that was not correct and charged with that. So yeah, that might be something that's also driving this.
Ms. Orr, thank you. You're on mute.
Thank you. It may be helpful also to note that CNP does provide a report to the Prawn Advisory Board numbering the encounters of violations that they found in the season, in the postseason review meeting. For 2020, there was no reference to retention of undersized prawns. In 2019, there was 8 categories of violations encountered. Prawn size was listed as one of them, but no reference to whether it was frozen at sea prawns or live prawns are found at a fish processing facility. So to give some context to that and to how we're presented with that information.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Orr. And to each of you, have you reached out to DFO or to the minister's office? And if so, have you received a reply or justification for the decision? So have you heard back from either DFO or the minister regarding that? Starting with you, Ms. Orr, and we'll work from there.
Thank you. So we did speak with DFO on this. We had been requesting meeting and speaking with Neil Davis and discussing the issue. We did write a letter to the minister as well to request assistance in bringing resolution and some logic to this issue. What we've been told is that for this year, DFO is willing to overlook the regulation in terms of not finding violation for prawn tubbing, but that for after this year, there will be no more grace period. So the response that we've been given is one that we're allowed to tub this year, but not after that. And that's sort of the end of the conversation in that regard.
Wow, so still providing uncertainty. Mr. McKenzie, do you have anything you'd like to add on that?
Just that, I mean, we worked with the region for a couple of months, trying to get some kind of resolution with them, some kind of means for compliance on that, and not seeing that, we reached out to the minister's office, and they came back and they said basically that it would be pretty much status quo for this year. And that there would be work with the sector over the coming year to bring something different in for next year. So, but in that, in saying status quo, they did say that it would be at the discretion of the CNP officer as well.
Thank you, Mr. Bragdon.
Okay.
You're gone over your time, actually.
Thank you.
We'll have to continue on. But I want to say before I go to the next questioner is it was great with Mr. Bragdon recognising each individual who he wanted to answer the question. It makes it a lot easier on the witnesses if you do that. So just keep that in mind. We'll now go to Mr. Hardy for 6 minutes or less.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it's good to see some old friends here. And we'll start with you, Mr. McIsaac. You mentioned the Portland Canal, and I remember being up there. First time I ever saw phosphorescence in the water was a night with the full moon and all the rest of it in the Portland Canal. It's something special that I don't think a lot of people have had a chance to do. The discussion here and the way it's come down so far takes me back now a few years to that other study that we did back in the last Parliament about sharing the wealth. And I'm starting to suspect that the business of tubbing and the process by which the prawn fishers are supplying directly to the consumer must be a problem for the processors. They must be losing out.
You want me to answer that?
Yes, I do.
Well, I mean, what I laid out there, it's pretty obvious that harvesters make more money when they can sell direct, when they shorten the supply chain, and it's significant. There is no doubt about that. In this case here, at least 50% less by selling through a processor. So yeah, that's obvious. That being said, I've spoken with a number of the processors, over the last 3 months, and I would say that this is not being driven by processors. That's the kind of the view that I would say, from speaking directly with processors and folks in that side. So yeah.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Jim. Ms. Orr, in all of the discussions after the initial surprise and shock of the DFO, sort of restructuring its policy, I had heard that regulations had been in place at least since 1979, and everybody was quite content with allowing the tubbing process to go through because no immediate issue evidently came up during that time. And I'd heard that, in fact, the tubbing has been a fact of life in the industry for 50 years at least. So what explanation did they give you for all of a sudden this mistrust of the ability to measure the size of prawns?
Thank you. I'm not sure that we've been given an explanation for why now. And you're quite right. The practice of tubbing has gone on for 50 years. I speak quite frequently with the retired DFO prawn manager, Mr. Jim Morrison, and he relayed to me that at the time when the minimum size regulation was brought in, that CNP was well aware of the practice of tubbing and that it posed no issue whatsoever. And that DFO, in fact, cooperatively introduced a Telson length measurement that would support the ability of CNP to measure frozen prawn tails when they're missing the head portion of the body. So these conversations reaching back, more than a couple of decades offer us a bit of a glimpse into the context of how this initially became. But as for now, why DFO is now looking to take a new view on the tubbed prawns, we're all scratching our heads. So I appreciate the question. I just wanted to answer quickly as well the previous question. It should be important to note that most communities are not capable of absorbing the full daily catch of the prawn vessels that come into port. So I don't believe that the buyers have much at risk in terms of the volume that may be diverted to the tub market. In consideration of what is landed, it's a smaller amount for sure. But the value is, whereas the fishermen can achieve a higher profit in those smaller boutique style sales, and what the difference that means to their personal income.
Thank you for that. James, a question for you. Historically, have there been many infractions for undersized prawns registered in the course of a season?
No, not that I'm aware of. The only reason I can think of this coming up is that if any tub is illegal, whether it's rec, FSC, or commercial, it's really easy to regulate. But if that's what the concern is, and it's happening now, if you take away the legal tub sales, well, it's pretty easy to figure out who's going to fill that market.
Well, who is it? Who is going to fill the market if you take it away?
Well, the illegal sales. Got
it. Okay, fair enough. Mr. Atkins, there seems to be still a lack of confidence in the fishery or the participants in the fishery this year that if they go out, some officer isn't going to exercise certain discretion and they could still end up being charged. Does that situation exist?
Absolutely. Yeah, very much so. Without a clear answer from DFO, it's really hard for the fishermen. Being told that simply officers will be doing education and it'll be at their whim if they choose to charge or not is very unnerving for fishermen.
How much time do I have left, Mr. Chair?
Not enough to ask a question.
Well, there you go.
We'll now go to Madam Gill for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to thank all the witnesses who are here today. I have a number of questions, but one of my first ones is that I see that no one here was consulted by DFO. So do you have any idea has anyone said to you why these regulations are being reinterpreted? And have you had an opportunity to ask any questions to the authorities? And all witnesses may answer. Thank you.
Monsieur Atkins.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, we have had an opportunity to speak with DFO, but really no answers at all. And what's even more disappointing is responses like, you guys should investigate freeze drying prawns or another method of preserving these prawns. And that's just not, there's no appetite from the industry. The value would be so much lower. These are some of the world's most sought after species of prawns. And that would really damage our image, our brand, and the industry.
So, Mr. McIsaac, please go ahead.
Exactly the same. Yeah, there's, we have had an opportunity to question the department around this. Their answers have been lacking. They have not, clarified what what made them reinterpret this regulation in such a way that 50 years of practice has gone out the window. We do not understand that. We do not understand the legal interpretation that they've got on this. We do know that there has been concern about the illegal, unregulated, unreported fishery, poaching getting into the market. But we think this is a bizarre way of trying to address that.
Yes. And I imagine that you believe that that won't solve anything at all because you don't have any reasons why behind this decision. What surprises me here, and I saw this elsewhere, is the delay in the answer, in getting answers to you. For example, it was only a few weeks before going out fishing that all of a sudden you learned that this was going to be changed. So what is the impact for you with regard to this delay? Because now you've got, you're off the hook, if I may say it, until 2021. But that really undermines your fishery and your planning for the future, that not having gotten these questions. Is that right? And once again, this is to all the witnesses. I'm trying to be very fair. So please go ahead.
So I would say, yeah, this is, if you're a small operator, you make investments and you build a business plan around your fishery, and part of that business plan might be putting a freezer onto your boat that's $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. The intention is to go to the Central Coast and to tub prawns. And market that directly, and your business plan is built around that. And it takes a couple of years to pay something like that off. It's not a small investment for a small operator. Independent harvesters are small operators, and so this is a big deal. And it's not something DFO telling us now that next year forget about it. People have invested in this kind of approach and the fishery in as a whole, to have this as the major structure in their business plan. So it's definitely difficult to change your business plan once you've invested in that, and the entire plank of your business plan is gone. So.
Madame Orr.
Thank you. So harvesters are very upset at the idea that this may impose upon their ability to sell prawns this year. And without much clarity from DFO, you can imagine the frustration level. Some harvesters have community-supported fisheries, whereas they pre-sell portions of their catch. And we're wondering, were they going to have to pay back those customers in advance without the ability to provide the product that they had agreed to? Many harvesters purchase the supplies to tub the prawns and have specially developed labels referring to their vessel number and date of catch, that sort of thing. I supported the work of many harvesters to expand their business model in order to sell frozen prawn tails last year as a reaction to the COVID disruption of markets. And so websites were put up and marketers hired, and people becoming much more flexible to the community's demand, which we were working very hard with the province to increase in terms of being able to help stabilize some of these prawn harvesters' bottom lines in terms of the difficulties COVID brought on for them. So with all of the work and the effort gone in to try to support harvesters in being able to expand their domestic sales and sell to their local communities, harvesters were furious and so confused and very stressed to think that this entire part of their business model may be out the window.
Thank you, Madam Gill. Your time is up. We'll now go to Mr. Jans for 6 minutes or less, please.
Well, great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to thank everybody on the committee for, again, fast-tracking this very important study. Maybe I'll start first, Mr. Atkins. I was talking to a former fisheries officer, and he's baffled at why this would happen. He was in the 70s and 80s, and he said, we always took a collaborative approach, working with the industry. And in fact, it was industry that came forward with the recommendations of the size of the prawns because of market. And he cited that the conservation is done by the spawner index. Can you tell us a bit about how the spawner index works and how it doesn't have anything to do with size in terms of conservation?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the spawner index is a tool to ensure that there's a certain number of females left in the water to reproduce and spawn for future generations. So that is the primary tool. And as James said, there are other tools with mesh size, single haul limits, all these things that help sort product underwater. And really, that's the key there. So this whole issue really comes down to the definition of readily determinable, and nobody at DFO has been able to provide us with a definition. And our lawyer, and we've supplied the testimony there, our lawyer has suggested that it does meet the definition, and yeah, it's just a very confusing statement. Yeah.
And I mean, given that it would only take 5 minutes to pour a hose over a tub.
2.5.
That sounds 2.5. It sounds pretty readily available. The size, I think that comes back to that piece as well. I mean, is there any benefit to a fisher to have small prawns? Because wouldn't that hurt your market when you're selling? Can you explain a bit about how that plays out if you have too many small ones?
Absolutely. There's very little market for small prawns. The market, the price, everything's driven by the size of the prawns. The larger the prawn, the larger the price. So fishermen don't want to fill the market with these smaller, medium prawns. They can simply be returned to the water and be caught later in the season or the next season at the next size up. So there's really no market for the small prawns.
Just this definition of readily available. Maybe, Jim, you can speak, Mr. McIsaac, you can speak a little bit about how this could end up playing out and actually impact other fisheries, say fish are in the hold of a boat. Can you talk about how just this might get, spread out and DFO could just turn around and say this actually can impact another species?
Yeah, it has that potential of spreading across multiple species. We don't understand exactly what they're seeing here and the implications of this. Hake here on this coast is frozen in totes at sea, and what does that mean? Is that put that offline? They're telling us not, but what happens to it? You fill a hole full of 50,000 pounds of fish, and the officer walks on board the boat. He can't see the fish at the bottom. Are you supposed to unload your entire hatch for him? What does this actually mean here? So yeah, there's some big questions.
Thank you. Ms. Orr, can you talk about the supply chain? Because we're hearing from people, from restaurateurs, people in the tourism sector, community market organizers, the whole coast seems united in standing with the prawn fishers. Can you talk about the implications, not just to the prawn fishers themselves, but to the whole coastal economy?
Thank you. Prawns in BC, dare I say it, are becoming almost like what lobster is to the East Coast. There's a tremendous growing and existing fan base for access to our local sustainable catch of prawns. And so restaurants are proud to feature them. They're celebrated as sustainable, both internally by DFO and as externally certified by places such as Oceanwise, Monterey Bay Aquarium. These make them a very, very attractive product for restaurants, especially forward-thinking restaurants, to be highlighting that type of seafood on their menus. So when we look at interfering with the availability of that product to restaurants and making it almost unavailable to tourism, we're basically looking to take apart decades worth of work to showcase something that we should be very proud of in terms of sharing this common property resource and celebrating it with the people in BC and the people that come to visit here.
Super, thank you. Mr. Lawson, you fish in remote communities, you're from a remote community. Can you talk about how this impacts remote and especially Indigenous communities, this new reinterpretation, and how impossible it would be for some of those communities to get their prawns to market without tubbing?
Oh, it would be impossible. Like, sure, I could probably arrange with the fish company to come take the export prawns, but without tubbing, I have no way to access a local market. So I'm pigeonholed into export only. And I am extremely lucky that I had lots of local people in Campbell River want to buy prawn tubs off me because it was so much more valuable to my export market prawns. It really boosted my business and kept me viable. We're in a position now where without urgency and transparency from DFO, we can't solve the problem. And it's a season loss for me to get sent in or investigated from my remote fishing grounds. So the safer option is to devalue my product after already setting up for tubbing and go into export only. I have to devalue myself to be safe now.
Thank you, Mr. Jans. Your time is gone over a bit. We'll now go to Mr. Arnold for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the witnesses as well for being here. Number of questions to go through, so I'll try and rattle them off quickly, and if we can get quick answers. Just a question for Mr. Atkins, please. How often were harvesters inspected at sea previous to this time?
I'm not a fisherman on the grounds, but speaking with my directors and other fishermen, I don't think it's very often at all. There's not a lot of funding for CMP to be out on the waters, my understanding. Maybe once per season they would be boarded, if that. The PPFA does pay into the CMP collaborative agreement to help with their efforts, but very little on the water action.
Okay, thank you. Mr. McIsaac, you referred to this as basically let me look at the wording you used here. It's an existential threat to the industry in BC. The fisheries sector was facing existential threats already with the COVID situation and markets, offshore markets being decimated and so on. It sounds like this was just another existential threat thrown on top of everything else out there. Would you agree?
Yeah, and for no apparent good reason as well. I mean, you just heard from James, kind of the impact it has on his business. He's got to devalue his business. There's other harvesters out there that have bank agreements that say how many tubs they're actually going to produce. And now, I mean, you're in a position, you can't meet your actual bank agreement because you can't legally produce tubs.
sounds like someone brought down a solution that was looking for a problem. For Ms. Orr, what options are there for random inspections on arrival at the docks? Would that be as effective as the random at-sea inspections?
Thank you for the question. I think it is really important to note that spawner indexing takes place aboard the vessels quite frequently throughout the season. And the number of samples obtained from the vessels typically means that each vessel may be boarded several times in the season. Some report being boarded once a week even. So when a spawner index test is being conducted, that is also an opportunity for any observations regarding undersized prawns or any violations of that matter. And that is a function of that spawner index as well, that the observers on board are mindful of any potential violations that require reporting. CNP officers are welcome to board vessels at any time opportunistically. They can meet vessels at docks. In some cases, they watch vessels from the shoreline. Any opportunity and every opportunity is available. And so while specifically boarding the vessels may not be as frequent by CNP officers, there is a terrific amount of interaction between observers and CNP officers throughout the season.
Okay, thank you. For Mr. Lawson, pardon me, can you describe how much product may be held on board the vessels and for how long it might be held on there? How often do you come into port to offload?
I'm a smaller freezer vessel, but I can hold my product for probably 10 days for about 5,500 pounds. And that is not a big vessel. So there's definitely bigger boats out there with way longer holding times where someone could come along at any time and inspect that product.
Okay, thank you. Would you say that larger vessels, the larger harvesters, are better equipped to monitor their catch and meet some of these regulation requirements?
No, we all go through the same process of grading and adhering to the conditions of license. I would just say they're able to stay on the grounds longer, but the process for making sure we have legal prawns is the same.
Okay, thank you.
Boats.
Maybe for Mr. McIsaac, have you heard from other species harvesters, other fish types of fish harvesters that are concerned about these changes that are coming forward so unannounced and without consultation?
I haven't spoken with other harvesters. Specifically, they're concerned about this being implemented in their fishery. Well, actually, some, yeah. Yeah, there is concern, but not, they're not facing this. There hasn't been any kind of direct change that's being targeted on another fishery right now that I know of.
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. We'll now go to Mr. Hardy for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, to Mr. McIsaac and following up on Mr. Arnold's question, we understood that oyster farmers had also, or harvesters had also recently been told on very, very short notice that certain regulations would either change or be, enforced differently. Had you not heard that?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, fair enough. So a question for Mr. Lawson. James, so it's not in your interest to catch and keep small prawns. There's no market for them. I've heard somebody else say that this is not a conservation issue. So first of all, can you describe what a legal prawn is and why the DFO would be interested in checking for them?
Legal prawn is done by a millimeter measurement, either off the telson, which is part of the tail, or the spike coming off its face, that I forget what it's called. But I have no interest in keeping small prawns. Like, why take prawns that are going to be more valuable later? I don't know.
Mr. Atkins, perhaps you can answer that. I mean, why are the DFO even inspecting? What are they looking for? Where can a prawn fisher, other than size, go wrong? And there's no interest in catching small prawns.
It's baffled all of us here. It's really unknown. There has been cases where undersized prawns have entered the marketplace through the unregulated channels, through recreational and different fisheries, but really unclear on what the issue is and why there's such concern over it, because it's so infrequent and there's no desire for the fishermen to keep them.
Ms. Orr, a lot has been said about the local market valuing the prawns that they get in tubs, and particularly restaurants, etc., obviously, who like to cook these up for their customers. Is there an alternative through a processor for, say, the local restaurants to get their product, and would that be acceptable, whatever that process is, to the local restaurants, or really is the tubbing, the best possible route?
Thank you. I'm sure the processors would process that product for the harvester and take on that section of the supply chain. However, the processor is going to charge the harvester for that processing, or the harvester is simply going to get a wholesale price for that prawn, the same as they get for the rest of their export market prawns. So what is lost there is the availability for the harvester to achieve a higher profit margin from that direct sale. There, as far as the actual preservation of prawns and freezing them, if we're going to discuss tubs and whether or not there's another route, some folks have frozen prawn tails in Ziploc bags, but the shell is very sharp and can pierce the bag, and then it leaks, and then you have freezer burn. So there's very few other methods, if any, that certainly there are none that can compare to actually using tubs. There just really is not another viable or reasonable way to freeze the prawn tails.
Mr. Atkins, on average, how many decent sized prawns would fit in a tub?
Oh, a tub like this, a 1 pound tub, you're looking at, say, 25 to 30 prawns.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they're usually in about what, 2 layers?
2 or 3, yeah. And part of our industry protocols was to suggest a limit of 1 pound to limit the time it takes to thaw, as well as mandating a clear plastic tub. So you can see sizes once the frost gets off. You can measure some of the sizes through the packaging. And
okay. Just checking here. So again, James, you're on the boat, you pull up your nets, and there's small prawns in there. What happens to them?
They get dumped out of the trap onto the grading table, and they get graded individually by hand. So I know right on my grading table, which is 7 feet away from me, we have marks etched in to the aluminum so we can measure them piece by piece if we have to.
And if something is too small, what happens to it?
Straight overboard, back into its habitat.
And there's good survivability there?
From what I hear, but I guess I've never followed one down, but yeah, that's the...
Nor should you. That's fine for me. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. We'll now go to Madam Gill for 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. J'ai vu tout à l'heure que Monsieur...
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'd like to hear the answer to the question with regard to the consultations and how they were impacted by the delay in DFO's response, and also what the impact is going to be with the uncertainty regarding 2021 season. And there are many things that seem very vague, so I would like to hear from all of the witnesses as to whether a regulation should be come up with very quickly, because otherwise they won't get any clarity until 2022. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry. Go ahead, James.
Oh, I was just going to say, I have 2,000 pounds worth of tubs sitting in my hold right now, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to use them. So a timely answer would have been a real great money saver for me.
Yeah, no, this there is so much uncertainty over this, and the fact that we were at the table working on a traceability label for these tubs, and now we don't even know if we can use these tubs. We've essentially lost another year of implementing a traceability program to limit the illegal sales of prawns. So we're all up in the air right now, and just waiting to see what happens.
J'ai peut-être mal formulé ma question. En fait, je souhaitais savoir.
Perhaps I wasn't clear enough. What would you like to see in the short and long term for solutions?
Really, I mean, the PPFA, the industry is willing to work with DFO on a solution. We recognize that we expect some restrictions, regulations, but as Ms. Orr said, there's really, or James said, there's really no other way to protect these prawns, to save these prawns. In water, frozen at sea, within minutes of their capture, is the best way to capture these. And to be suggested to do things like freeze drying or to vacuum seal them, it just doesn't work. This is the only method.
If I may, I think what we would ultimately like is for a reinterpretation, so that we can go back to business as usual and focus on things that are more justified to earn our attention and our efforts. This to everybody seems actually quite irrational that DFO would make prawn tubbing illegal. The first choice would be to have the rethinking of this issue back to the status quo that we were all working very well under. If that's not possible, we have suggested a condition of license be added that spells out the requirement of harvesters to be able, or to need to be able, to render prawns available to be determined for size and species with a time limit, whether that's 5 minutes or 4 minutes, whatever it is. We've asked DFO to consider that. They have not responded to that proposal. However, we would like to see something very quickly, because as you've pointed out, the disruption to the markets, the instability it's creating, prawn customers already reaching out to many harvesters and asking, am I going to be able to buy prawns? So there's a tremendous loss now in terms of folks that are looking to buy prawns. In the uncertainty, may begin to look elsewhere and buy prawns from overseas instead, with the uncertainty looming. People do need answers quickly. A working group to carry this out over many, many months, to us makes no sense. This should be a very simple solution, and one that happens swiftly.
Thank you, Madam Gill. We'll now go to Mr. Johns for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Orr, can you talk about the consultation piece? Like what was done by DFO before they decided to reinterpret this regulatory process with your industry, and what actually would normal consultation look like in terms of what you'd expect with the industry in the sector?
Thank you. As the group of witnesses has said, there was no consultation prior to this reinterpretation. Typically, what we would see is a report or proposal to the Prawn Advisory Board. The Prawn Advisory Board met December 3rd. There was no report of this impending reinterpretation. The draft IFMP, Integrated Fisheries Management Plan, would typically offer some insights as to changes as they might be planned for the coming season. There was no mention of it there either. The consultation we would expect on any type of reinterpretation such as this, typically, if it were to reflect what has happened in the past, it would carry on over a couple of years of time before something was implemented. This was quite unstructured in terms of what we were used to be expecting.
You know, I was talking to that former fisheries officer, and he asked me, you know, what has DFO identified that undersized prawns in the catch is a big problem? Because he said he hasn't seen anything of that nature, and he's wondering why the department's literal interpretation of a regulation that requires some creative solution. So if they'd come to you and consulted properly, what kind of creative solutions could you have presented back to them?
And I think that we've done that quite quickly in a reflex to this reinterpretation, is by offering, as Mike Atkins has said, the PPFA developed protocols to offer a solution in terms of supporting CNP and upholding the regulations. And the PIC offered a proposal of a new condition of license. We worked very quickly with the people that we represent to ensure that we were suggesting proactive solutions that would support all parties moving forward. So apart from that, as I say, just a reversal back to the prior thinking that prawn tubbing is acceptable. Those three options sound very good to us.
Have you heard from the minister at all? Anything at all from her office?
Yes, there was an acknowledgement of our letter and that that this was being worked on. The statements from the minister's office about it being a conservation issue and that the practice of tubbing was quite new was, I believe, relayed to the House when MP Rachel Blaney spoke to it. These were very troubling replies to us because it is misinformation, unfortunately. The non-retention of undersized prawns is not a conservation issue. And of course, we've been hearing prawn tubbing has taken place for over 50 years. So we're very much hoping to correct some of the misinformation around this issue in hoping to find a resolution.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jans. We now go to Mr. Calkins for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a question for you. Let's go back to the fall of 2020 when some of the discussions were going on changing the marketing from more international to more domestic. If I'm following everything that's been said correctly, there was discussions with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans and various stakeholders, which included the PPFA, on creating a traceability program, a traceability-like program, and using the tubs to market domestically. Do I have that right? It doesn't really matter who answers, Mr. Atkins, Ms. Orr, whoever wants to answer that.
Yeah, that's correct. It this all came out about at the table while we were dealing with the traceability piece, and it really wasn't thought out clearly, because if an individual made a comment in a meeting and 2 days later we get notified that the regulations have been changed, I don't think there was a lot of thought that went into it. So
I just want to know, who are the other stakeholders at the table other than the PPFA?
For the traceability work, it was PPFA, DFO Fish Management, and DFO CMP.
So there really wasn't nobody from the industry outside of your industry association. It was all department officials, correct?
Correct. Yeah, we represent the entire prawn fishery, but yeah.
Yep, no, it's fine. You represent everybody on the commercial side.
Correct.
Right. So you're not displacing anybody economically, or nothing's getting displaced economically from a regulatory change. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's economic impacts for sure.
Okay, so who would the economic impacts be on, outside of members of your organization?
Well, I mean, having prawns not domestically available in Canada would hurt consumers.
No, I understand. I guess what I'm asking you is, I'm trying to find a rationale or a reason for the regulatory changes, because nothing that we're discussing here today would lead me to believe that the Department of Fisheries and Oceans would make a unilateral change. There's nothing that's changed in your practice. There's nothing that's changed in 50 years. You've been you've testified here that you've been cooperative with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans when it comes to traceability. So my question is to you, then, what could possibly be motivating the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, who are going to testify at some point in time before this committee, and I'm going to ask them questions about why they made the changes that they did, and they're going to have some rationale or reason for it, and I'm trying to guess what that is here. So has anybody been displaced economically that you know of, whether it's legitimate economics or economically in any other way that you're aware of?
I have not spoken to a single person involved in science, fishing, regardless, any which way, that understands this or has any explanation for it. So if I would like to hear an answer from DFO.
Yeah, well, we're going to get to that. And just to remind myself, this is an effort-based fishery. It's not a quota-based fishery. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. I think, Mr. McIsaac, you brought up IUU fishing. What would the rationale be in this particular case? Because I'm assuming that everything you guys catch eventually makes port in Canada at some point in time, correct? Like you're not offloading from your boats or from your vessels anywhere but a Canadian port. Do I have that correct?
That's correct, yes.
So there is no reason to think that, from an enforcement perspective, if it's not happening on a vessel, that it couldn't happen at the point of landing as well, correct?
That's correct, yeah. So the IUU component, a couple of the of your members asked questions around this, and one of the other fisheries that was identified as having some kind of radical changes recently is the clam fishery, and they're basically there's an estimate that about 2 to 3 times the actual commercial landing is being brought in through the IUU fishing, and then the way to stop that is to drive all of the entire fishery through processing plants instead of direct to consumer or restaurants or what have you. So that's a response from the department to get a handle on IUU. And I'm not certain if there's something like that happening, or they're thinking that there's something like that happening with the prawn fishery and IUU. And that this is a way to get a handle on that, and really, it thoroughly disrupts the prawn fishery.
Well, what's happened outside the fishing fleet?
Mr. Calkins.
Oh.
Time has gone a little bit over. We'll now go to Mr. Hardy for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if the tubbing is no longer available, what kind of alternative process might be used that would still, for instance, provide an acceptable product direct from the fisher to the customer? Mr. Atkins, we'll start with you to see if you have any, because you're obviously going to have to start thinking about this if, in fact, the DFO requires some changes for next season.
Yeah, thank you. We're still exploring options as a group, as a board. There's really not a lot that we found so far, and it makes us very nervous. I'm not too sure if I have a good answer for that.
If the tubbing isn't available and the local restaurants, they can't get the product from the fisher directly, and they have to get it from a processor, what can you speak to in terms of the quality of the product they'll get from the processor and the price versus what they would get directly from the fisher? Ms. Orr, could you speak to that?
Sure. It is our hope that the processing companies are maintaining the highest level of quality possible in terms of any processing that's done, and it's certainly in their best interest to do so. In terms of price, I cannot give any recent examples for the differentiation between what a restaurant might purchase from a fish buyer or what they would achieve in getting direct from harvester, as those prices fluctuate annually. What I can say is that the difference between selling a pound of prawns to your wholesale buyer and being able to sell it to a person that comes to purchase it directly from you out of your community can sometimes be the difference of $10 per pound. So that's a very stark difference. And so even if it's a very small portion of a vessel's catch that is staying domestically for sale in tubs, it's quite a large contribution to their overall profit. I hope that answers some of your question.
Well, it would seem, just by way of a comment, that the absence of tubbing would actually deprive small local markets of access to a really excellent product. Yeah, everybody
Absolutely.
Nods. That's good.
Absolutely. Last year we had in Powell River some local harvesters set up pop-up sales throughout the season, and in some cases the afternoon they would have over 300 people lining up from this small town, and almost every time they did that, that's the lineup they had, and they had people cheering in the lineup for the option to be able to purchase local seafood, because that is something that we do hear a lot. Is why can we not buy local seafood? Why can we not access local seafood? Why is it all shipped overseas? So here in this fishery, where we are making great strides and terrific efforts in making it available for locals, this would be a very, very detrimental step backwards.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to give some time to my colleague, Mr. Cormier.
You have just over a minute, Mr. Cormier.
Okay, I'll try to be quick. Like just on the same questioning of Mr. Hardy, like let's say it's a conservation issue, because I also found the decision that was taken a little bit like maybe we can question the decision, but about other option, my father fish for all his life, like lobster now on board, they have some tubs, not the same kind of tub, but big tubs that they have water recirculation pump. They put the lobster in, live longer. Same for crab, for example. It's, instead of putting crabs in the holding tank with ice, they keep them alive, in water now for up to 2 days. Like, is there other option for you guys to that you can take to have those prawn, stay alive longer, have a better quality arriving at the wharf, or like it's only frozen that you can have this?
It's very difficult to. Go ahead. To replicate the environment that prawns come from, which is very deep water, the temperature needs to be exact to literally the degree. The salinity needs to be 21 parts per million. It needs to be oxygenated water. Prawns are very temperamental once they're brought to the surface. It is possible to keep them live in holds of water, but doing so for any longer than a day becomes even increasingly difficult. I do know of people being able to do it for a few days, but it is a very delicate process. Please go ahead, James.
Thank you very much, and thank you to my colleague Ken for his time. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Cormier. We'll now go to Mr. Mazier for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses this afternoon here. I'm a farmer in Manitoba here, and my heart goes out to what you're going through right now. I cannot believe what I'm hearing here. So, Mr. Atkins, is my understanding that prawn traps have a minimum mesh size requirement to ensure small prawns have the ability to escape. So does the mesh size address most of the concerns around the size requirements? And if not, are there other ways for inspectors to verify that size?
You are correct with the mesh size, and there's also escapement rings, and the single haul limit allows that as well. The longer the prawns are in there, the smaller ones are going to be pushed out by the larger ones. So that is all captured within the trap. Sorry, I forgot the second half.
Well, is there other ways for the inspectors? In your opening remarks, you referred to there's other ways of looking at sizing, and is there some other way that the new approach that they could take, or the inspectors could actually verify size besides what they're doing right now?
Really, measurements are the single way, but we suggested that the onboard observers from our service providing company could offer a bit of that service as well in CMP's absence, but primarily just measuring with calipers.
How much of the product do you think gets inspected? Like in a normal season, would it be 1%, 2% in the existing system right now?
Quite a bit higher with respect to the on-ground observers, but from actual CMP, I'm not too sure. I'm not sure if Emily or Jim has an answer.
I don't believe that there's data available in terms of the relationship between percentage of catch inspected and CMP's inspection rate. I don't believe that exists.
Oh, okay. Ms. Orr, it's clear that there is a lot of uncertainty in the region right now, and harvesters are unaware how DFO is interpreting the regulations. The new interpretation appears to be make the practice of tubbing illegal immediately. However, DFO has stated that they won't enforce it as of yet. So they're kind of watching you, and they're making everybody look over their shoulder. Can you explain the impact of this uncertainty around enforcement and the lack of clarity in communication it's having on harvesters?
Sure, thank you. The fines that could be placed on a harvester and the interference with their fishing time if they are asked to come into port for inspection, if they're found in violation really of any sort, can be devastatingly costly to the harvester. And what we are hearing from DFO is that while the posture of CMP this year will be one of inform and educate, that CMP still does have discretion available to process violation charges if they felt it necessary to do so. So there's really no assurance for harvesters that want to tub prawns this year that they can do so and have no issue with that. So that's very confusing and stressful.
Well, would anyone else like to comment on this as far as the lack of clarity and just what kind of stress that's putting on all your businesses or your members?
Yeah, so I would say, I mean, one of the first comments that the department made to us around this whole issue was that the onus is on the harvester to comply with the regulations. And you ask, well, let's understand what the regulations mean and what the issues are, and we don't get a clear answer. So it becomes very, very difficult to comply with the regulation that you're not understanding, what has changed since last year. That just it makes it impossible. So without the regulator telling you, how they're understanding a regulation, it's very difficult for an industry to comply with it.
I'm not too sure if there's any time, but this is spilling over to other industries as well, because freezing product in blocks is, as Jim said, is common practice in hake, groundfish, shrimp on the East Coast, euphausiids. There's a number, and they're 25 to 40 pound blocks, way more onerous to thaw out. So there's anxiety spilling over into other sectors as well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Major.
Thanks.
It's a bit too close to get another question in there. We'll now go to Mr. Morrissey for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question is to Ms. Orr, because in DFO, there's 3 criteria that should determine their reaction or interaction. One is the stock, the security to stock, the quality of the product being sold to the consumer. And third would be, is there illegal activity in them? So you say this has been going on for 50 years. Could you just quickly address the issue of how is the stock, the catches today versus over the last 50 years?
Sure. Thank you. So
stable?
I would say that the efficiency of the prawn fleet has increased due to development of better gear. However,
but is the stock stable?
The stock is very stable.
Very stable.
We are well recognized as a very sustainable fishery, and our management
there's no issue here with the long-term conservation of the resource. And I see Mr. McIsaac shaking his head. Okay, so that checks off one of them. Is there ever been any recorded history of a quality issue with the product sold to a consumer?
I think that there are individual cases where quality may not have been as optimal as possible, but I don't know that is something that DFO is looking to resolve in this. Certainly, it's in everybody's interest to produce the best quality product as possible. And any time where the quality has suffered, I think typically it's due to some type of breakdown in the supply chain. I'm not sure if that's helpful to your question.
Okay, yeah, well, it's pretty accurate. So there's been no cases or widespread case of a consumer being or ill health as a result of buying one of your tubs frozen at sea.
None that I'm aware of.
None that you're aware of. So that would address the quality issue. Am I correct in interpreting then that, which they can, DFO personnel can board any fishing vessel and ask to do a compliance check? Correct?
Yes.
To any? Okay. And Mr. Lawson may be on there too. He's a fisher. So is there anything stopping DFO personnel from taking a random sample of your frozen tubs? At their request, they can choose wherever they want to go?
Nope.
No, just last year there might have been one hiccup just with COVID protocols about boarding vessels, but otherwise, no, they have that right. Anytime.
So am I correct then? DFO protection personnel enforcement can board a vessel and choose a sample randomly?
Yes, we encourage them to do so if they have questions.
So then I, like the rest of the members in this committee, are baffled as to what the objective is here. If the stock is over 50 years with this practice is stable going forward, I can see where the fisher would want to do it, because here on the East Coast, the scallop fishery will open tomorrow in my riding. I can buy product directly from the fisher, scallop meat frozen. And a lot of people do, and the fisher wants to do it for the same reason you're doing it, because they get a better price. They get a better price. So I am surprised at what the enforcement came in here at the last moment. So where do you see? I would have a question here, and tell me when I'm out of time. If it goes to the commercial to the commercial processor, who controls the commercial processing industry? Is it one control on the BC coast?
Not on prawn. Not
on prawn. So no. It's widespread, the processing sector.
Yeah.
Okay. Then again, I'm confused as well as to see why a DFO would spring this on your industry at the last moment, except they have a really good history of, I'll say, blank, blank, blank fishermen off on an ongoing basis.
I think you got it.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
It may be helpful to quickly point out the PPFA hired Landmark to do studies on our management system as a response to the management evaluation that DFO had requested. And in that study, there is quite a bit of data modeling that actually indicates that we are not fishing as much of the harvestable biomass that is available to us.
Thank you, Mr. Morrissey. We'll now go to Madam Gill for 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. En fait, j'aimerais...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would simply like to complete the round table earlier. I was asking what the expectations were in the short, medium, and long term for all of the witnesses here. So I think that Mr. Atkins responded, and I would like to hear from the other witnesses, because I don't think that Ms. Orr was able to finish her answer, and then I'd like to hear from the other witnesses with regard to that.
Thank you. I do believe that it should be possible to reverse the new thinking and revert back to what was the status quo before this issue evolved. And failing that, I know that harvesters would be much more willing to need to thaw tubs of prawns out upon inspection request than to be canceled of the opportunity to sell their product in tubs. Everyone that the PIC represents is very much hopeful that we can come to a resolution that allows the continuance of freezing prawn tails in tubs. And so the manner in which we achieve that, we're certainly open to conversation on and very hopeful to have it resolved as quickly as possible.
Yeah, so I would just echo the comments. You know, in the short term, you know, the identification of you know, a random sample being sufficient to meet the needs. Moving forward, you know, some kind of standardization, you know, set with the industry on tub size and transparency, that kind of thing would be useful. I just hope that we do not, you know, outlaw this you know, method of taking product to market in the long term. Thanks.
Mr. Lawson, did you want to comment?
Yeah, I have no problem. Anybody coming aboard and wanting to inspect my catch for quality control and compliance, but I don't want to give up tubbing because that's the highest quality product. If I have to sell an inferior product to locals, what's the point? You just make a bad name for yourself and you lose the market entirely.
Donc, en fait, si je vous entends bien, tout ce que vous...
So if I understand you clearly, is that you need a clear channel of communication with DFO to ensure that it's not too complex. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Gill. We'll now go to Mr. Johns for 2.5 minutes, please.
Just a question, Mr. Lawson. It's my understanding there's about 230 vessels fishing prawns, and that you can only stock 2 licenses, so you can really only have about 500 traps. So this sounds like it's all a small-scale fishery, you know, all independent operators. Can you talk about the size of the fleet and how small the fleet is and how important this fishery is to that fleet?
I think there's 240 something licenses. I'm not sure how many operators because I don't know how many do stack. But yeah, like you said, it's either 300 traps for a single license or 500 traps for a double license. And this fishery is hugely important to fisheries businesses. Like I know for mine as a younger harvester, last year it was at least a third to a half of my income. And given the way fisheries are now, like we have to be diverse. So like taking the value out of a fishery like this really hurts my career as a fisherman as a whole, not just in this one fishery, because what I gain in value from prawns for my business ends up paying for upgrades into other fisheries as well. It spills over into me being a more well-rounded career fisherman.
I'm in Tofino, where I'm from. The Spot Prawn Festival, it's done with the Pacific Prawn Fishers Association, with the Chef's Table Society at BC. I mean, this isn't just about the economy; it's about our culture. Can you talk about the impacts of that, maybe, Ms. Orr, about like how this impacts our culture and what's on people's plate at restaurants in BC?
Yeah, and then it's great to hear that you've been to a prawn festival before, and I've helped host them before in False Creek as well. And it's a terrific show of the community, and so many people enjoy celebrating what we have to offer here from our fishery. When I think about the people there watching cooking demonstrations from local chefs and speaking with members of the fishing community about how prawns are caught and having that exposure to something that is literally on their doorstep, it's a connection that people have that is part of what is the fabric of our coastal communities. And so removing the accessibility of the public to purchase seafood from the vessels, to me, is an undermining of the relationship between harvester and community, and what other building blocks can be as important as that in terms of preserving coastal communities.
Do I have any time left, Mr. Chair?
No, it's all up, sir. Just a couple of seconds over. We now go to Mr. Arnold for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This appears to be a real legal desktop interpretation of the consideration or the interpretation of the regulations, without consideration of the practicality of the on-water situation. Mr. McIsaac, you identified that DFO was not able to share their legal interpretation of the regulation. Can you tell me how harvesters can attempt to ensure that they comply with the regulations if the department responsible for enforcing is unwilling to share their legal interpretation with the harvesters before they go out?
Well, it certainly makes it very difficult. DFO are very, very clear that the onus is on the harvester to comply with regulation. But they don't seem willing to give us their interpretation of the regulation, which is very challenging. I mean, you can imagine that, right? So they're also, I've got to be just clear here. They're speaking out of both sides of their mouth on this. They put out a fisheries notice on April 9th, and if I can, I'm just going to read one line from it. Freezing of whole or tailed product in solid blocks of tubs of ice will require the harvester to provide randomly selected samples to be thawed for inspection by fisheries officers. That's exactly what we had asked them for through February and March, something that clearly says that this is what the situation is. And then on the same day, they emailed us and said that conservation and protection will apply discretion in the enforcement of the approach in the 2021 season, recognizing the efforts that the industry has put in. But these two, pieces of, conflict. For harvesters, they're sending mixed messages to harvesters on exactly what the situation is, for this season, and that's, a huge challenge.
Thank you. You also mentioned that there appears to be, I believe you said, a high incidence of illegal activity in the clam market, and that the department has been trying to get a handle on IUU, illegal, unreported, unregulated fisheries. I just want to note that this committee had months ago approved a study on IUU, but that study has been repeatedly delayed for multiple reasons, proroguement of Parliament and everything else on top of that. Do you see IUU or illegal unreported unregulated fisheries as a threat to the sustainability of fisheries and the livelihood of harvesters?
But certainly, it undermines legitimate harvesters right across the board.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lawson, can you elaborate a little more on the difference in value of your frozen at sea versus bulk delivered to docks for processing product? The value not just to you as a harvester, but the resultant spin-off businesses that either supply you with services or that buy from you as a harvester?
There's, in the prawn fishery, there's live boats and then there's frozen boats. So I'm a frozen boat. And last year, like I said, I sold my prawn tails for what it was equivalent of $15 a pound. And my export frozen prawns sold for $4 a pound for mediums, $6 a pound for large, $9 a pound for XLs, and then $11 a pound for jumbos and extra jumbos. And just for what could be, like a fishmonger in Kelowna sold a tub of jumbo prawns for $65. So it really hurts to have to sell them for $11 if there's no market for tubbing them myself, when I could be getting a far superior price, because I was just selling mixed prawns for that $30. If I split them by quality and size, I could be getting a far superior price to that even. And then yeah.
And the quality has to be maintained by that quick freezing in tubs. Do they deteriorate if there's a length of time before they come to the dock for processing?
Yeah, absolutely. Having the quick freezing into water assures that there's no air that's going to cause freezer burning, and it kind of brines the prawns in the salt water. So they're just top notch compared to any other form of value-added processing aboard.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. We'll now go to Mr. Hardy for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. They say that the CNP officers can exercise discretion. Over what? If the focus is they're checking to see if you're tubbing, you're either tubbing or you're not. What else could there be? I don't know who can take that one. Jim will give it to you.
I mean, we're baffled as well, right? So the inform and educate, we can understand, but if the discretion means that they can decide whether they're going to enforce this, the way that they're have reinterpreted the regulation. That's my understanding of this discretion, and that means that you're at risk if you're harvesting and tubbing and they decide to come aboard and check.
Mr. Lawson, being on the water, you could hopefully answer this. And this question actually goes back a couple of studies, but the prawn fishery, is it mainly an owner-operator driven fishery, or are we dealing with people owning the licenses, et cetera, that have never set foot in the water?
Just like all fisheries, it's a big mix. For instance, I do not own my license. I lease out of the PICFI program put on by the federal government. I do know owner-operators, and I do know people that strictly lease. And lease costs can be very high. Like not this season, but in seasons past, they can go for as high as $60,000 to lease it for a season. So you think about that kind of overhead, plus your bait, plus your fuel, plus your food, and then you're not getting value for your product because you can't self-process and value add aboard. Like it's a really steep hill to climb.
Okay, so just do the quick math for me, if you would, please. What price per pound do you get, when you sell a tub of prawns, and how much of that if your leasing would go to the owner?
Typically, leasers, a lot of times leasers are companies and they expect you not to tub their prawns because they will expect all the product from their lease license. So some guys will still do it, fly under the radar a bit, try and get a little extra money out of it. But it is expected if you're leasing, you'll sell to their market. So you may not even have the option.
Okay, well, that goes back to an early question that I asked.
Before you go to that, I believe Ms. Orr had her hand raised. I don't know if you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I see that. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Orr?
Thank you. Just quickly, I wanted to point out that most of the harvest effort controls that are our fishery regulations were promoted by industry itself. And harvesters are, for the most part, very protective that those regulations are followed. And so any violations such as double hauling or fishing outside of the set time or retention of undersized prawns is very offensive to most harvesters. So it's important to note that because this fishery is very important to the people that make their livelihoods from it. So when we talk about CNP officers using discretion, my understanding is that if a CNP officer were to encounter a vessel that was, for example, in violation of other regulations, and there was a clear defiance of the regulations in multiple ways, that they may utilize that discretion to put forward charges for that reason. But in terms of this particular issue, obviously, as we've discussed, it's very difficult to understand what that discretion relates to.
Thank you. I want to go back then to actually my first question, because Mr. Lawson suggests that there's an obligation on the part of the fishers to sell all of their product to a processor, and that some may, go the tubbing route to make a few extra dollars to add to their bottom line. So it sounds like there is the possibility that there's been some pressure on the DFO to take this route from people who stand to gain, if in fact the fishers have no alternative but to deliver all their product to a processor. Anybody care to comment on that? Mr. Atkins.
I haven't heard any pressure coming from the processors, so I don't see that as the avenue. Others are welcome to jump in.
I know a couple seasons ago I was fishing out of Pender Harbor, and there is a drive down dock there and like docks at homes, and there's a plant there. So the guys that leased licenses from the plant had to deliver there to ensure their bait supply kept coming for $7 a pound. And the guys who could drive away with their product as owner operators got 15. So.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. I will advise the committee that we've gone through the complete round. We have about 6 minutes left. I was going to suggest we do 4 1.5-minute questions for each of the parties, if everybody is okay with that. And I'll use the chair's prerogative to say everybody is okay with it. But I'm going to do it a little bit different. I'm going to start with Madam Gill for 1.5 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Alors, peut-être comme dernière question, j'aimerais savoir si les témoins pensent que c'est un bon moment pour annoncer une nouvelle.
Whether the witnesses think that it's a good idea to announce this, to make this announcement to fishers, as if things weren't already difficult enough with COVID. So what do you think of that kind of timing? And all witnesses may answer.
It's terrible timing. Absolutely.
It's extremely hard timing because we don't even know when we're going to start, because they might delay the season for market reasons, which is really strange considering that they're taking away the tub market from us on the other hand. So
the domestic market has been the saving grace with COVID. That is what's saved countless fishermen. And to remove that would be, how do you come back from that? Yeah.
It's entirely tone deaf to what the challenges are facing industry participants now.
Thank you, Madam Gill. We'll now go to Mr. Johns, please.
Just to clarify, it's one question, Mr. Chair, to everyone? Okay. I just, back to the remote and rural, like the farthest fisheries away from market. Can you talk about the impact to those fishers and to those communities and what that will do to those vessels, and just a little bit more about COVID and how COVID has impacted these fishers straight up and down the coast already, and what this is going to do to them?
Yeah, I'm from the Heiltsuk Nation and I fish out of Bella Bella, which is very remote. And last year I sold them some tubbed prawns to help with the food security in the region. And if that's unavailable to me, I cannot sell them prawns because the dip I have to put my export prawns in is not food grade for Canada. So if I can't sell to my own nation in tubs, that's awful.
Everyone can get a shot at this, yeah.
Yeah, and it in the remote areas of the coast, there's no readily available processing plant to handle this, so it makes it impossible to fish a huge part of our coast if the and serve the domestic market that way. So it really throws that disadvantage as well.
I think it's been maybe said already, but if we cannot freeze prawn tails in tubs, it means that locals only have access to prawns during the roughly 40-day season. Many prawn buyers back when I was fishing would buy 40 or 50 pounds frozen in tubs at a time to last them throughout the year. And that was part of their food plan. So removing the ability for people to do that, whether in busy communities or in remote communities where they really rely on that provision of food, it just makes absolutely no sense.
Thank you, Mr. Jans. We'll now on the Conservative side, Mr. Calkins was due to be up next. I don't know, Mr. Calkins, if you're going to be the one to take a couple of quick questions or if somebody else is going to do it.
Well, I can, Chair. Let me just turn my video on. I want to go back just to a couple of questions in regards to the monitoring of the fishery. I know in some cases on the coast there is cameras on boats. Are there cameras actually on any of these prawn boats at all?
No cameras. They use a vessel monitoring system, so GPS functionality, but no video cameras at this point.
So my next question then is there any other product that would be taken commercially from the West Coast that you would be allowed to freeze on board or put into a tub or put into a package that would require the same type of length measurement type of restrictions and would be as easy to identify as a 2.5 minute thawing process for tubbed prawns? Is there any other species that would even come close to this type of ease of enforcement?
Well, there's other fish that are tubbed that would be much more difficult to do, to defrost. So what we were talking about with hake, which is in a large tote, and then there's other species of fish that are individually actually frozen at sea, but they would be very, very hard to discern unless you defrosted them.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Maybe just quickly to add to that, there are other species of prawns and shrimp that are retainable under the W license, but there is not a size requirement associated with those shrimp.
Thank you, Mr. Calkins. We'll now go to Mr. Hardy, please.
Okay, I'd like to, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to sort of lead this through. So you can't tub, which means then that your product would all go to the processor and you end up with less money. The processor will probably freeze dry it, and I've seen some of that product in the fishmongers in Steveston, and it doesn't look nearly as good as what we've seen, Mr. Atkins hold up in that tub. But nonetheless, the fish processors freeze dry it, and then it probably goes to export. I thought we heard that earlier, which means then that we're bringing in prawns from someplace else. Now, how do they arrive? Do they arrive in tubs or are they all freeze dried as well? Does anybody know?
So the prawns that are processed at the seafood buyers can be tubbed. They are not under the requirements and regulations that the harvesters are. So in fact, they could be selling them in the same tubs that the harvesters are selling them in now. But yes, you're making an important point. What will replace the local caught harvest of prawns here, if it's not available to the public, is most likely going to be an inferior product from overseas, as many people find at the pubs and in the restaurants.
That's astounding. So the processor can sell it in a tub, and it's not subject to easy access for inspection.
Yeah, it comes down to the wording of the fishery general regulations that it's the catcher, the fisher, cannot modify the product, but a processing plant can absolutely tub them.
Okay, well, I think I've had enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. I know our time is not quite ran out, so I'm going to offer Mr. Jans another question if he'd like to ask one, since he's the one who put this study forward.
Well, first, I want to thank everybody for your really important testimony. I want to thank my colleagues. They've asked excellent questions. I mean, I'm like Mr. Hardy. I mean, we're all baffled about this. Have you heard anyone on the coast that thinks this is a good idea? I haven't come across anyone, like nobody. Former DFO scientists, environmentalists, nobody that can tell me that this is a good idea. I just see people shaking heads. Do you want to start, Mr. McIsaac, and then we'll go to Ms. Orr? And
yeah, nobody has come to me and said this is a good idea. It needs to happen. I have heard nobody say that in any of the sectors. Any of the fisheries, even inside of DFO, people inside of the department are saying this is bizarre.
Totally. And Ms. Orr?
Yeah, it's not often that the public is so ready and raring to gather around a commercial fishery, but we've had tremendous support from the public by means of our federal petition, and as well as anybody that we've gone to for assistance in bringing this matter forward. On top of that, we hear also from CNP officers who speak off the record to folks that they don't support this, but they do not have the avenue to provide that viewpoint. I can't speak too much to that, but from what I have heard, even folks in CNP are against this reinterpretation.
Mr. Atkins and then Mr. Lawson.
The same thing that I'm hearing. The actual current CNP officers are baffled and won't come forward at risk of their jobs, but no understanding about this at all.
Goose egg. 0 people think it's a good idea.
Thanks you all. Thanks to everyone. Again, thanks to the committee as well for the great questions.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Bragdon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I think you would find probably consent here amongst the committee. I think all of us have come to the agreement that we need to get this fixed as soon as possible. We need to ask that it gets fixed as soon as possible. I think we've heard significant testimony here, and every one of the panelists that have asked the question seems to have come. So I do have a motion prepared in both official languages that we could submit real quickly here. And I can read it if you like, Mr. Chair, and hopefully we could get unanimous agreement on it. If I can have your permission to submit the motion. I do have it in both official languages that we can circulate, be sent to the clerk right away. So.
Okay, but have you given it to the clerk to circulate?
I believe it's on its way as we speak.
We could run out of time. Oh, okay, never mind. Sorry.
Yeah, it has been sent to the clerk. Yeah.
Okay, I'll wait for nodding of heads or something to tell me that everybody has received it in both official languages.
Mr. Chair, on a point of order?
There's usually not a point of order and a motion.
Okay.
You can ask for a clarification.
Sorry, that's where a clarification. This has been interesting testimony, but a motion at the last moment as the committee is running out of time, I haven't seen it yet. and to make a decision. I don't know how complex the motion is. So we do have another meeting coming up on this subject. If we could consider it then.
I believe the motion has been circulated, Mr. Chair. I just received it from the clerk.
Madam Gill?
Oui, Monsieur le Président, je voulais dire que je l'avais.
Mr. Speaker, I just want to say that I had received the motion.
Thank you.
No.
I can read the motion if you like, Mr. Chair.
Well, I'm just waiting for everyone to let me know that they've received it, Mr. Bragdon.
Thank you.
Okay, I see a thumbs up from Mr. Arnold. Hand up, a thumbs up from Mr. Johns and Mr. Mazier. Mr. Hardy, you get your hand up? Or is that a thumbs up?
Both, Mr. Chair. I'll comment when the time comes.
Okay. Mr. Calkins, have you received it? Thumbs up, okay. Mr. Batiste? Thumbs up. Mr. Beach? Mr. Cormier?
No, sorry, Mr. Chair, I have not received it.
Okay, we'll wait and see. We're not going to wait too long, I guess. Hopefully.
Mr. Chair, since the members,
Yes.
since most members have received it and the interpreters and the staff here have it in 2 languages, would you want us to read it?
I think Mr. Bragdon will read it now as soon as I get the okay that everybody has received it.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The motion is as follows, that the Chair, Parliamentary Secretary, and Liberal Party committee members request an audience with the Fisheries Minister tomorrow to ask her to permanently rescind the reinterpretation, and that the Liberal members report back to the committee on Wednesday, May 5th.
Okay, Mr. Hardy, you have your hand up?
I do, Mr. Chair. Although what we've heard is quite shocking in many respects, we really do need to hear from the DFO because it goes beyond belief that there couldn't be some rationale for the decision that they took, and I'm dying to hear it. So I would not support this.
Thank you. Mr. Johns.
Yeah, I appreciate the motion coming forward. I'd like some time to think about it. It's kind of a strange motion that the timing of it for tomorrow. That's the only thing. I really appreciate it, actually, Mr. Bragdon. By the way, it's I mean, I really hope that this is dropped before we even meet again on this. To be really frank with you, I don't think we should meet again on this. But you know, given out of respect to Mr. Hardy wanting to hear the department come forward and explain themselves, we need to hear from them. Or otherwise, I mean, hopefully the minister just deals with it herself in the department. I mean, unless they've got a really good argument, which I can't imagine they do, that I hope that this gets fixed before we have to even meet again on this. That would be my hope, instead of tying up another whole committee meeting and 2 hours on this thing. But so I don't think the motion is best that we decide today. I hope that we can think about a pathway forward before we meet again on Wednesday.
Okay, Mr. Arnold.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think if we could get this passed today, it would certainly bring certainty to the harvesters out there that are so unsure of where their future is going. They're probably buying tubs or not buying tubs, depending on how they feel about this. Nothing in the motion precludes us from carrying on with another meeting to hear from the officials on why decisions were made, the reasons behind it, but it's certainly and I think we certainly should hear from them as to why the decisions were made, because we hear of reinterpretations affecting other species as well. So I think we could continue with another meeting on this, but we certainly need to bring certainty to the harvesters at the soonest possible opportunity, and this way would be one way of doing that. Thank you.
Okay. Madam Gill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In fact, I think that the motion could also be amended. The witnesses talked about the status quo for this year, so perhaps if perhaps we could come to that. And also Mr. John said that perhaps tomorrow is a bit too quick, and so perhaps we could change the motion amend the motion by changing the date. So I might move an amendment if that's possible at this time, Mr. Chair.
Faire plaisir. Je ferai un amendement.
So I would amend the motion to refer to the 2021 season. It gives a bit more clarity for the fishers this year, and that does not prevent the committee from continuing to hear from witnesses, especially from the DFO for the future. That's what I suggest, Mr. Chair. Mr. Calkins.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I think we're actually missing an opportunity here to go straight to the decision maker, or supposedly the decision maker, who is responsible for taking care of those involved in the fishery, and that would be the Ministry of Fisheries and Oceans. I mean, we as parliamentarians have heard from the people in the fishery, and there is no explainable reason we should be talking to the minister. The minister has more than ample time to get a briefing quickly from her department and come and explain to the committee either the rationale for the department's decision or explain to the committee how she's planning on rectifying the situation. And I think time is of the essence. And I think it behooves the minister to do what's right and is obvious in what appears to be unanimous support for the fishers that are before us and the industry stakeholders that are before us today. And I don't, for the life of me, see why we wouldn't use the authority that we have, the limited authority that we have as a committee, to actually do something good on behalf of the people who sent us here, and get to the bottom of it right away. I don't know why we wouldn't do that. I mean, I've rarely seen something that appears to be so open and shut before this committee in the years that I've been on this committee.
Mr. Calkins, are you talking to the amendment?
Well, I was going to talk to the motion before the amendment,
but I think deal with the amendment first. I believe is the normal way we would do it.
But I mean, the amendment, I don't think substantially.
And then talk to the motion after that.
Okay, go ahead. You're the chair. I'll respect that.
Thank you, sir. So if there's no other discussion on the amendment, I'd ask the clerk to perhaps read it out and do the vote.
On the amendment of Madame Gill, Mr. Batiste?
Mr. Chair, a point of order. I believe you asked for the amendment to be read out again.
Yes, I did. Just so as everybody has an understanding what the amendment actually is.
Could we ask Madame Gill to read out her amendment?
Okay, Madame Gill.
Bien sûr, en fait, je voulais simplement substituer.
I simply wanted to change it to permanently rescind instead, rather to change it to rescind for the 2021 season.
No.
Mr. Beach?
No.
I'm sorry, Mr. Beach, could you repeat that?
No.
Monsieur Cormier?
No.
Mr. Hardy?
No.
Mr. Morrissey?
No.
Mr. Arnold?
I vote no.
Mr. Bragdon?
No.
Mr. Calkins?
No.
Mr. Mézières?
No.
Madame Gill?
Oui.
Mr. Johns?
No.
Yeas pour 1, nays contre 10.
Okay, so the amendment is defeated. We'll go back to the original motion. Mr. Johns, you have your hand up.
Mr. Chair, I had my hand up after Ms. Gill, and you asked me to hold my comments.
I did. I'm sorry. I apologize, Mr. Calkins. You're up, sir.
Sorry, Gord, but we'll get to you. So I just think that we have the, I think we have the opportunity here to summon the minister. I don't know why we would beat around the bush and wait to hear from department officials when we have the opportunity to intervene immediately and talk to the minister. It looks like the committee is unanimous in its support for the stakeholders that are here. Like I said earlier, just to reiterate, so I'm on the record at the right point in time in the debate, rarely do we have this kind of unanimity. Rarely have we seen something as obviously unjust, even though it might seem like a minor issue. This is a very important technical issue for the harvesters. And we have an opportunity as a committee, I think, to actually influence change in a relatively short order. And goodness knows that the Good Ship Canada does not change direction in a timely or quick fashion, usually at all. I don't know why we would be hesitant or reluctant to do that. I don't see this as being a confrontational or combative issue with the minister at all. If the dozen or so of us at this table are all feeling the same way about this issue, then surely to goodness, if we brought our colleague who is the minister to the table to have the conversation, I don't see that being combative at all. I see it being constructive on behalf of fishers, and I don't know for the life of me why we would hesitate to use what little influence we have sometimes as a committee to influence that change as quickly as possible. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Calkins. We'll now go to Mr. Johns.
Yeah, so I had misread the dating on this. I think this is a good motion. I mean, this isn't that complicated. They've got to, they can't have, need weeks, to work on this to come back to us to explain their decision. They made up their mind on this. I mean, it should have been well thought out. It shouldn't be hard for the minister to get the information tomorrow and come before us on Wednesday. So I'll absolutely be supporting this motion.
Thank you, Mr. Johns. Mr. Bragdon, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to this again. And thank you, Mr. Johns, and I agree that all parties here have come down on the need for this, and I think that we've heard from each of these witnesses, and I think it's very important for the harvesters to have a signal sooner rather than later and have certainty around this, so that there's not, in the midst of COVID and all the other uncertainties right now in the global markets, to have further uncertainty with this left ambiguous, and we don't know exactly for sure when we're going to hear from future witnesses, and action being delayed. Let's take action on this. We seem to have all agreed on what we need to do here. Well, let's get action done and get it done sooner rather than later so that our harvesters have the certainty that they need. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bragdon. Mr. Arnold?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be quite short, but I have to agree that we've got Canadians, the harvesters, the communities that they support and that support them that need some certainty as they move forward, certainly through this year and beyond. And I think this is quite a reasonable request of the minister to explain or at least to provide some information back to the committee immediately so that the harvesters and the Canadians can have some certainty going forward. That's all I'll add at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. Mr. Beach.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I just wanted to utilize this opportunity to reiterate what I've often reiterated to this committee, which is the minister is always happy to come and meet with her colleagues on the Fisheries and Oceans Committee. That being said, I don't think I've witnessed, at least not in the 5.5 years that I've been serving on these committees, such a short deadline. The minister is already invited to present to this committee on the salmon study. By passing this motion, we would of course be deferring the next salmon study meeting. The opposition has an opportunity to ask on this issue every single day in question period during QP. I would just suggest that if this is the ultimate priority of the committee, that perhaps we would give the minister a little bit more time in order to make an appearance. But that's just me. I also think that there is a reasonable argument for listening to the DFO officials and then having the minister come in. But the committee is independent and the committee can do whatever it sees fit.
Thank you, Mr. Reach. Mr. Hardy.
Mr. Chair, I guess there's two dynamics here. What the DFO has done and how they've done it. Now, if the minister comes swooping in and says, no, let's clear the decks here, we're just going to let this go on as it is, I would hate to see the DFO, in effect, let off the hook for coming in and explaining themselves in this process. Why did you do that? And most importantly, why did you do it the way you did it? I think that there's a learning opportunity, shall we say, for the DFO to come in and spend a little time, being slow roasted here, which I'm sure our committee members are quite capable of doing. And I would like to see that happen as opposed to just rushing to a conclusion. Let's give the DFO the fair process that they obviously haven't given other people.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. Mr. Calkins.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I would respectfully say in response to Mr. Hardy's comments that the issue at hand isn't the slow roasting of department officials whose salary and paychecks do not depend on any specific timeline at all. And we have individuals at the table here for whom a fishery season starts who have laid out cash and have put their livelihoods on the line that need a decision on this in a timely manner. And if I look at the schedule, the fishing season is supposed to start prior to when we would potentially even have DFO officials coming back to the table. So I don't know why we'd hesitate. I mean, nothing would stop us post-minister coming in as soon as possible from going back and exploring the hows and whys and the consultation process retroactively. But I think what's urgent right now is to fix a problem. Otherwise, why did we have this committee meeting in such a rushed manner? I mean, we had so many other committee studies that we have adopted over the last year and a half of this parliament. It was so urgent to get this done in a timely fashion. And now all of a sudden it's not urgent because lo and behold, we want the minister to come before the committee. And like I said, I don't see this to be a confrontational thing. I mean, we have an opportunity here as members before this committee, members of this committee, to actually fix something that appears on every level. There is no mind here at this table that can fathom or figure out what the possible motivation for this could actually be. So it's just something, it's an oversight, it's a whatever the case might be, but there's nothing here that the minister can't explain. And there's nothing here that the minister can't overturn. And we have an opportunity to correct an injustice, what appears to be an injustice, immediately. I don't know why we would hesitate in the name of, well, let's figure out how this all went awry. We can do that later. Right now, we have an injustice that needs to be fixed in a timely fashion so that people can get out on the water and earn a livelihood. And goodness knows that's getting hard enough to do in this country.
Okay, before I go to Mr. Morrissey, I will say to the witnesses, you're free to leave the meeting at any time. You haven't got to stay, or you can if you want for your own pleasure. But I just want to let you know you can exit the meeting at any time. I'll go now to Mr. Morrissey.
Thank you, Chair. I just need clarification. What are we discussing? Bringing the minister? Because the motion, unless it got changed, I don't believe it was, is that the chair, which is you, the parliamentary secretary, and Liberal Party committee members request an audience with the fishery minister tomorrow. So we're going to have an audience tomorrow. I'm not sure if I'm ready for an audience tomorrow to ask her to permanently rescind the reinterpretation and that the Liberal members report back to the committee. I would like to know, Mr. Chair, for the clerk to give an opinion on when a committee has directed other members of the committee to take an action on behalf of the committee. I find that a bit perplexing. So, Mr. Chair, could you explain just where we're going on this, or have the mover explain?
I can ask Mr. Bragdon to explain, I guess, or.
Mr. Chair, I want the clarification on on voting to direct certain members of the committee to take a particular action. Is that within the scope of the committee's mandate?
Okay, I'd have to go and ask the clerk for clarification, perhaps.
Could I? And that's what I'm asking for, Mr. Chair. First, I would like, because what I'm voting on, because this is, in my time, I've never seen this type of a motion. I mean, obviously, everybody wants to get here. I too would like to hear the officials, and then the minister would have the final say. But the motion is directing you as the chair and a parliamentary secretary and the Liberal Party members to take on a particular action. I'm perplexed, Mr. Chair.
Madam Clerk.
Monsieur le Président, Monsieur Morrissey, merci beaucoup pour la question.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Morrissey, Mr. Chair, Mr. Morrissey, thank you for the question. Yes, normally committees make a decision during the committee, so it's a good decision of the committee and not an indication to certain members to do something indirectly rather than on behalf of the whole committee. In general, the committee would adopt a motion to summon the minister in order to have a motion adopted or have a report sent to the House indicating so it's rare that certain specific members of the committee would be asked to use their influence on the minister.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mr. Morrissey, I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Well, yes, Mr. Chair, it appears the clerk would be saying that a motion cannot direct some members of the committee to take a particular action on behalf of the committee. Did I interpret it right, Madam Clerk?
Si on nous demande vraiment,
if we are asked whether that is in order, then we would have to check in the standing orders. If I'm just looking at the committee powers and their power to summon witnesses in order to report to the House, if you want to know whether the committee can ask certain members of the committee to exert pressure, then I would have to check in the standing orders.
Then, Madam Clerk, that's what I need a clarification on. It's most unfair for a member of this committee to bring a motion to be voted on the committee directing and naming certain members of the committee to take an action. I find that difficult to follow, and I would like a clear interpretation and ruling be brought back to the committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I know that others have their hand up, but I know the mover of the motion has his hand up. Perhaps he'd like to add something to this discussion since he's the one that moved it.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that. But once again, look, all of us are wanting clear action on this. All of us are wanting to see action taken sooner rather than later. There's been very few times in the function of this committee that we've had something as clear and as needed to happen in an expedited fashion as what we are seeing before us right now. We have heard from multiple witnesses. We've heard this raised in the House of Commons by several parties, and season is fast approaching. This is not an unreasonable request. This is asking that a decision be made right away that will bring absolute certainty to the harvesters who are most affected by this change of interpretation that has gone against 50 years of precedent. That is not unreasonable, and that is not something that is done in an ill spirit. This is just something that is a reasonable ask that we get action taken on this, and it was a motion to make that happen. I hope that all members of the committee can understand that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, I'll go back to my list. Mr. Mazier.
I guess just on the same theme, being a farmer, I understand the rules of nature. Everything works in cycles. And these witnesses, these people sitting in front of us today, are running on a different cycle than we are as parliamentarians. They don't have time to go and consult with the minister or consult with the department. They need answers now. They got to report back to their families. They report back to their communities. They have to feed people. I definitely get that. And what minister in their right mind would sit back and say, oh, I want to put it off to another day? So I don't understand all this pushback from colleagues of the government to say we got to delay it for another meeting. Just get the conversation going with the department and the minister and report back. Everybody can go ahead and do what they have to do when these people in front of us, they can go out, make their livelihoods, and with respect and dignity, and not having to look over their shoulder, figuring that the government's going to come out and get them. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Thank you, Mr. Mazur. Mr. Johns, before your hand gets weak holding it up.
I don't know when my hand function is not working. First, I'm actually ecstatic that the Conservatives now want immediate action because they voted against making this a priority, this study, and that everybody's heard how timely this is. So I support this motion. I'm really appreciating Mr. Bragdon seeing the light on this, that we need to move quickly on supporting these fish harvesters. And so I think that it's a good idea. This isn't that long, and this isn't complicated. This isn't some big issue where they need weeks in advance to prepare the minister for. This is simple. We need some simple answers from the minister and her to appear. Hopefully she just makes the right decision tomorrow morning and says, that's it. We're not going to do this anymore. We're going to stop the assault on these prawn fishers. That's the hope. Let's hope that that happens. But I support this motion wholeheartedly.
Thank you, Mr. Johns. Mr. Hardy, you had your hand up. It's down now. Okay. I'll cross that one off. Mr. Arnold.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't think there's any reason the members can't approach their minister. They're in her backyard, basically. I'm sure her staff has been monitoring everything that's been taking place in this committee today, and I've seen members from all parties shake their heads at what's actually taken place and agree that what has taken place needs to be reversed. Canadians' lives are dependent on it, and the initiative needs to be done sooner rather than later. We don't know when we are going to get the officials back before this committee, and as I said earlier, we certainly need to hear from those officials to understand their reasoning, but we need to hear from the minister if she's going to rescind this interpretation in perpetuity so that these harvesters can get on with their lives and support their families.
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. Mr. Beach.
Well, thank you to my colleague, Mr. Morrissey, for clarifying the motion. I still haven't received a copy of the motion in dual languages, which I believe we clarified is what needs to happen before we can debate this, specifically for the reason because the first time that I spoke to it, I didn't actually know what the entire motion was, despite it being read. I still haven't received it. I'm hoping that somebody is working on that actively in the background. The other thing that I would say is this sense of urgency that is being displayed by members. I have said in the House of Commons as a response to a question during question period, at least once, maybe twice, I'd have to check the blues that tubbing is happening this season. So I don't think that this motion is actually helping anything get anything specific accomplished, but I just wanted to make sure that those 2 points are on the record.
Thank you, Mr. Beach. Mr. Morrissey.
Again, Mr. Chair, the motion is not to call the minister before the committee that we're being asked to vote on. The motion is to delegate you, the parliamentary secretary, and certain members of the committee to have an, quote, audience with the minister and to report back. Mr. Chair, that's what, and the clerk is already, it's questionable if this can be done by the committee. There is a number of methods the committee could choose to send an urgent letter to the minister asking for her clarification to confirm what Mr. Beach said to the committee, that this issue has been dealt with clearly for this coming fishing season, which is what people want and request. Then we'll hear from the officials and get to a long-term decision. But it's my understanding from Mr. Beach, and nobody has contradicted that, there's a bit of ambiguity. We could get that cleared up, that tubbing will be allowed for the coming fishing season. I think it would be more prudent if the committee sent a dispatch to the minister asking for clarification and confirmation of what Mr. Beach said to the committee, and then provided to the fishers that are on the West Coast. That would actually be helpful, Mr. Chair, and that I would be very, very supportive of. But voting on the motion, we could vote on the motion as is now in here. It will not accomplish getting the minister in, because that's not what it is asking to say.
Thank you, Mr. Morrissey. Madam Gill.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would simply ask whether the clerk is she working to ensure she's just trying to make sure that the motion is in order, because we're going a bit we're going a bit beyond. But I would just I know it's a lot of work for the clerk, but we need to know whether the motion is in order. First, there's the procedural information we're trying to get, and also the fact that there are there's another meeting at 6:30 here, so we're just working with logistics to see what can be done, or whether we have to change rooms. So we're trying to do all that at the same time. We're going to get back to you as soon as we can.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Gill. Nancy, if I could ask one question of the clerk, because I know it came up in a discussion from Mr. Morrissey earlier, and the nature of the motion itself, as was raised, for empowering the chair and the parliamentary secretary and Liberal members to, as referred, I think somebody called it an audience or whatever, or to have a meeting as such with the minister, just us, requesting that this be reversed. And I believe Mr. Morrissey has asked for the validity of such a motion. Could you please enlighten me, if you can, to the answer that was given?
Of course, the committee can agree on some things, but it wouldn't be binding, because it's not one of the power that the committee has to have a indirect influence. So of course the committee can decide all sorts of things, but per se it would not be binding, and it would not be anything that is procedurally formal. Donc ce serait pas la manière habituelle.
So it wouldn't be the usual way of proceeding to cause an obligation on the part of the minister.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. Mr. Morrissey, you have your hand up again?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Again, I would like the clerk to clarify, because I've sat on multiple committees. I've never seen a motion such as this that a member makes directing certain members of a committee to undertake something with certain ministers and report back. I would be agreeable. I can't speak for all, but for if the committee chose to send a letter to the minister, an urgent request to the minister, confirming the position Mr. Beach outlined that was stated in question period, that there's no question on the legality of tubbing for this coming season. That would be very helpful to everybody involved, including the fishers. That would be the most helpful aspect, and I'd be curious to hear where the committee came. Then we proceed with the committee as it is scheduled to hear how DFO officials arrived at the position they're taking, and then follow up to ensure that whatever action is taken does not impede against a long-held practice on that fishery. That would be more beneficial. But again, as the motion is clearly the motion does not appear to be in order, and simply, in my opinion, and I don't want to aggravate everybody, it simply was window dressing at the last minute to pretend somebody wanted to move quickly. If we want to confirm a follow through with this committee, is to get it clear unequivocally what the position of the minister and DFO is in regards to tubbing. This committee could send that request for clarification to the minister by email or a letter and get that clarification for the fishers on the West Coast, which I assume would be very helpful to them. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Morrissey. Mr. Arnold, you get your hand up again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, this was put forward today after the testimony we heard today, where repetitively the witnesses said that this makes no sense. We have members right around this table that have said that this makes no sense. They've continuously shaken their head at it. What we're trying to do here is to get members on the committee that are able to get a direct message to the minister in an immediate way, to get them to do that. We've seen letters of response back from the minister take as long as 4 months. These harvesters can't wait that long. They need to know whether they can purchase tubs, how they can equip their vessels, and so on. And I would just urge the members to consider following through on their words of platitude today to make sure that they follow through on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. Madam Gill, did you have your hand up again, or was that from previous? Okay, thank you. Mr. Morrissey, have you got your hand up again?
Yes, so just so we're clear, so the members from the West Coast Fishery understand what's going on. If this motion is voted on and approved, it will accomplish nothing because it cannot bind the committee members that it's referring to. So I just want everybody to be clear. It does not bind anything because the motion is simply directing the chair and the Liberal members of the committee to do something that they're not bound to do. And I, for one, will not be following up on that, Mr. Chair. So it's important for the fishers on the West Coast to understand that approving this motion is not going to accomplish anything on a definitive answer. We can request with the strength of the full committee for a definitive answer from the minister, which has already been articulated by the parliamentary secretary, Mr. Beach, that the minister, the question was answered in the House, and that this season tubbing is going to be allowed. So we want to get that clearly, and I fully support your request and for committee members to getting a clear directive from the minister. And I think that can be accomplished by the committee to swit.
Okay, Mr. Johns.
Well, a couple things. First, we did hear testimony. We're united in seeing the injustice that's happening to these fishers. Everybody on this committee has recognized the injustice. That we're united on. This motion, you're right, if it's not binding, it's sending a message to the minister. And I see if we support the motion, we're asking the members of this committee on the government side to meet with the minister, get the minister to make a quick decision, given that the whole coast, the whole West Coast is united on this. We're asking the minister to just make a decision, explain what she's doing by Wednesday. I don't think this is a far-fetched motion, and I think we should all support it and hope that the minister gets back to everybody quickly. And I mean, again, if she's not prepared on something like this, then we got a bigger problem. She made a decision like this, which impacts the livelihoods of these fishers, the coastal communities which they live, the restaurants, the whole coast, the integrated food web of our tourism sector even. I mean, if she's made a decision like this, and she thinks that she's going to leave it to a fisheries officer who might be having a bad day to say that while they have discretion, that's not good enough. It's not good enough for Ms. Orr, and it's not good enough for Mr. Lawson. So I think she should be here, or at least sending a message back to the committee on Wednesday why they're doing this, or have the department in front of us on Wednesday reporting back. Like, why wait? You know, this is why I called for an emergency study with the support of Mr. McGregor and Ms. Blaney. We wanted this study as an emergency, and I know there was pushback, There was even colleagues that said it was a knee-jerk reaction. This is not a knee-jerk reaction. This is absolutely a priority. So I support this motion. I hope we'll all support this motion. And hopefully by Wednesday, we get something back so that these people can get back to fishing where they belong instead of in front of our TV screens. They belong on their boats on the water so they can feed their families.
You're muted, Mr. Chair.
Sorry about that. Mortal mistake. No, Mr. Johns, all I'll say to that is, yes, it was imperative on the committee to get this particular study started right away. But as you know, at the last meeting when we discussed schedule, Wednesday was booked for something else, I believe, and maybe the next 2 or 3 meetings. But so to have anyone come Wednesday, they're probably already lined up to come for what was already previously set as a schedule by this committee last week. So to change that. But before I go to Mr. Calkins, the clerk, I think, was signaling that she wanted to say something.
No, I don't especially need to say something. We're trying to figure out how long we can stay in that home with the same services, and we're working on that as you are debating.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
I'll now go to...
Am I the only one who doesn't have a raise hand function as part of their
I don't either.
I can't raise my hand through the, and I think that Mr. Gorge is the same. Gorge is the same. Richard, are you? I can't find the raise hand function. So I've been wanting to chime in, but I'm just saying, is anyone else having this problem?
Yeah, they are, obviously. So you got to wave frantically for me to notice you. That's is the easiest way to do it. And I will say, Mr. Calkins, you were up next with a hand raised. I notice it's not up now.
Yeah, I know. I'm having so much fun because I can put my hand up and I can take my hand down whenever I want. The function works perfectly fine on my machine. So I just thought I would do that. But notwithstanding that, I do think we should, as a matter of respect for other committees, perhaps resolve this sooner rather than later. But that's a question for you to decide, Mr. Chair, when we get to the question. But I just wanted to make a note that the simpleness of the ask of this particular motion was for Liberal MPs who care enough about the fishery to go talk to their minister to see if we can get a different result. And I find it very disheartening to see one of the Liberal committee members wanting to actually win this on a technicality to not serve the interests of the people that appear before the committee today, rather than actually just going ahead and doing something a little bit unorthodox and getting something done on behalf of Canadians.
Well, actually, Mr. Calkins, that technicality may either carry the day on this motion if it passes or turn it down. So it could be challenged on that very technicality. So it's, you know, you can't cross both T's there. Mr. Beach.
Mr. Chair, I won't be voting for this motion, but I'm happy to inform the caucus that I speak to the minister quite regularly, including on this issue, and I'm happy to speak to her today.
Thank you, Mr. Beach. Mr. Bragdon.
Well, I think Mr. McDonald, I think it's very, or Mr. Chair, I should say, it's very important that we just, I think we've talked about this, we've gone around it. I think a motion's on the floor. Let's have the vote. And I think we should do this, you know, for the harvesters that are represented here. And I think it's an important signal to send that this is a priority for each one of us, and it's a priority for the Canadian harvesters. And we'll move the motion. And then how the particular individuals respond to that motion and what the government chooses to do with the motion, or the committee members, obviously that's going to be up to those who are going to have action to take from this, whether they choose to or not. But I think the motion's on the floor. I call it, you know, if you would, Mr. Chair, we call the question.
I can't call the question, I don't think, with someone with their hands up to continue discussing it. And Mr. Morrissey has his hand up. Mr. Bragdon, I'll go to Mr. Morrissey first.
Mr. Chair, could you give us a ruling on the questions that I have raised?
Okay. Could I ask committee to suspend for a moment, and I'll have a chat with the clerk? I'll ask her to give me a call. So we'll suspend for a brief moment.
Thanks.
I've been told that the only way that individual members can be directed to do something specifically is by the House of Commons. So therefore, I am compelled to rule the motion inadmissible as it now is. Mr. Morrissey, you got your hand up, or are you waving goodbye? Okay, Mr. Johns, you have.
Mr. Chair, no, I wasn't waving goodbye.
Oh.
Mr. Chair, we could proceed with a motion that would read something like this. I'm not sure if we can amend an inadmissible motion, but that the committee asked the minister to provide clarity on this season's regulation to industry as urgently as possible in order to provide certainty for this year's season. I would be agreeable to that. We all agreed as consensus on getting clarity from the minister. It was just the process that was being put forward by the Conservative member was, as we found out, is inadmissible, and it simply wouldn't accomplish anything, Mr. Speaker. And I, for one, on this committee, want to accomplish clarity, and I believe we could do it in a motion such as I suggest if it receives the support of this committee, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. Mr. Arnold, you have your hand up? Or, wait, no, I'm sorry, Mr. Johns was waving his hand as Mr. Morrissey was. I was debating with Mr. Morrissey if he raised his hand, if he was just waving it.
No, I definitely had my hand up. And I think, we've asked for clarity from the minister. And this motion that was, inadmissible, I mean, I think we could still amend it. So we're just asking the minister to permanently rescind the interpretation and a letter coming from the committee. So all we could do is take everything in here and we could just, that the committee.
Mr. Johns, you can't amend a motion that's already deemed inadmissible. Mr. Morrissey has a motion on the floor. If you want to amend that, fine.
So I think we should amend. Hopefully Mr. Morrissey will be friendly on this, but I mean, we can't just have this open-ended, no timeline, vague motion to the minister to, this season, rescind the reinterpretation of the rule. We're asking her to just stop this permanently, just to drop the whole thing, and that's what we need. That's what we're looking for, and I think that's what the goal of this. And I'm hoping Mr. Morrissey would be open to amending his motion. We're sending a message to the minister. We're calling on her to rescind her decision and the reinterpretation of this rules. Everybody heard. We're united here, thinking this is ridiculous. I don't know anyone who doesn't on this screen. And so I just hope that Mr. Morrissey be open to an amendment, cleaning this motion up that he's got, so that. And I mean, how are we going to do it with the rules around translation? Because we want to make sure that we accommodate Ms. Gill, and out of respect to Ms. Gill, we have to, honor that. And so I hope Ms. Gill can, share her perspective on that, because we have to respect her and her rights to having this in her language. So in French as her first language. So I just want to ensure that we have this in both official languages. But I'm hoping that we can pursue something a little more substantial in terms of a motion if we're making a motion. The previous motion was vague at best, and I think we need something a lot more clear and a lot more substantial from this committee.
Okay, before I go to anyone else, I will ask Madam Gill if she's getting all of this in translation.
La traduction. Si j'ai déjà obtenu une traduction.
I haven't received a translation, but yes, I can hear the interpretation.
Okay, thank you. Now, Mr. Arnold, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What Canadians need is certainty. all we really want is for the Liberal members to meet with the minister and relay to her the urgency of this matter. Really, it's coming down to legal opinions on what the interpretation is, and I don't know if there's anyone except the minister that can actually put out a directive to say what that interpretation is. The interpretation was that tubbing would not be permitted. It needs to be very clear that that tubbing will be continued, and the reinterpretation will be rescinded. That these prawn harvesters and the people that rely on them need the certainty. And really, all we wanted was for the government members on the committee to approach the minister to express the urgency of the situation and have her be very clear, not just provide an opinion or a clarity, but be very clear that the reinterpretation that tubbing would be illegal has been rescinded. That's all. Thank you.
To that point, Mr. Arnold, to one of it at least, I believe I already ruled that the committee cannot direct people to committee members to do something. It has, the only way that can be done is through the House. But yet your discussion was that you're asking the Liberal members again to do exactly what was inadmissible in the form of a motion. So I'll now go to Mr. Calkins. Had his hand up, maybe he got it back down.
Well, I did put it back down. Suffice to say, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the comments that Mr. Beach made earlier, suggesting that the intent of what our motion was had already been done in that effect. But I'm looking forward to Mr. Johns actually presenting something, if he has some specific text to specifically request something of the minister. I would be happy to see what that is.
Thank you. Mr. Beach.
I hope I can suggest the following common sense solution to the committee. I've already stated that I'm going to speak to the minister today. There's a motion on the floor right now from Mr. Morrissey, which I guess is somebody is probably rushing to translate into French so that it can be an actual motion. But we do meet on Wednesday. So the motion, I think, and I don't have the exact wording in front of me, but if the motion says that we request an urgent response, if we don't have a response by Wednesday, well, then the committee can continue to take further action. So why don't we pass Mr. Morrissey's motion? And if committee members feel like further action is needed on Wednesday because they don't feel like enough action has been taken in the next 48 hours, then we can deal with it then. But I think that if we just pass the motion, I know that the minister is taking this issue seriously, and I would expect there to be urgent results.
Mr. Bragdon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I mean, obviously now we're down into procedure and we're down into this and that. Well, really, we can expedite this. If Mr. Beach is agreeable that he can speak directly with the minister, we can have something back perhaps as early as Wednesday night that will give clarity to the fish harvester, the prawn harvesters, and to the sector that want urgent action taken and clarity brought to this situation. Then that brings the resolution that we wanted. And if Mr. Beach has already volunteered willing to do that, I see Mr. Johns is in favor of that. I think we would be good with that as well. And I'll take Mr. Beach at his word. I trust that we'll have some form of clarity around this on Wednesday, by Wednesday night, hopefully. So I'm good with that. If he's good with that,
okay,
I think we got to where we need to be.
I see Mr. Beach gave a thumbs up to it, so I believe we'll take that as the affirmative. Madam Gill, you had your hand raised.
En fait, c'était pour la motion.
It was for the motion of Mr. Morrissey that I hadn't received in French, but if we can agree on that, then L is fine for me. So I'll agree with you for Wednesday.
Okay, Mr. Morrissey, are you okay with that?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'll rescind my motion based on the common conversation here and the undertaking that Mr. Beach has given to the committee.
Okay, and I know, Mr. Arnold, your hand is still up, but I don't know if that was up from the previous conversation. Okay, it's down now. Okay, now see, that's the committee back to normal now, congenial and getting things done together as a group. Great to have everybody back. But on that note, I'll say thank you again to the witnesses today. And I have to say, it was, as an East Coaster, it was very informative to hear what's going on the West Coast, and that you're experiencing some problems that I experience on this side of the country as well. So again, thank you one and all for your testimony here this evening. Very valuable. And again, I want to thank Mr. Johns for actually pushing this as a study to get it done, because it seems like it did need a lot of attention brought to it, and hopefully we can get something rectified very shortly.
And we all agree you need a quick, clear answer.
Exactly. All right. And on that note, I'll say meeting adjourned.
Good luck to everyone. Good luck to our fishers out there. Good luck.